Chapter 390. These words once again confirmed Roland's previous speculation that the God's Stone of Retaliation did not affect magic power, but interfered with the witch's ability. Apart from the Beast of Chaos, did the Quest Society find any other way to transform magic stones? Agatha shook her head. It's easier said than done. The Union once had witches who could transform God's Stones of Retaliation into ordinary stones, but they simply erased the magic structure of the God's Stone. To transform it into a magic stone, even the simplest stone of illumination is far from enough. She looked at Sylvie. You can see the form of magic power, so you should be able to see the true form of the stone. A weak cloud, Sylvie said hesitantly. That's one of the ways magic power is condensed. Agatha nodded. The Quest Society has observed and calculated nearly 10,000 witches and magic stones. We found that before the promotion, most magic power is in the form of clouds, cyclones, flying sand, light balls, and flames. They look the same, but in fact, the changes in the details are almost endless, which is why we think there are no two completely similar abilities. As for the further condensation of the ability after the High Awakening, the shape is even more different. Its light has dimmed, Tilly suddenly said, pointing at the stone of illumination in Roland's hand. Because I only injected a little magic power into it, Agatha explained. But I've seen a stone of illumination in the fjord ruins, she said confusedly. If that underwater ruin is also yours, it means that the light. The Cold stone has been shining for at least 400 years. Is that even possible? Underwater ruin? Agatha was surprised. Did members of the Union go to the swirling sea? Then she shook her head and put this question aside. It's indeed possible to make the stone of illumination shine, but it requires the help of more than 10 witches. More than 10. Anna thought. Is it magic power transfer? That's right, some witches can replenish the magic power of others, or directly exchange the magic power of two people. In this way, the person who injected the magic power into the magic stone will have a power far beyond their own, which will allow the magic stone to continue working. Agatha restored the stone of light to its original brightness. However, this method does not work on every kind of magic stone. Generally speaking, only the simplest magic stone, such as the Stone of Light and the Stone of Echo, can be used in this way. Unfortunately, these are of no help in the battle. But it's very useful for the castle. Roland looked at the box of glowing stones and said excitedly. Before the age of electricity, this thing was simply the best lighting tool. He had long been tired of the flickering light of candles. It was fine in the winter, but working in the office in the summer was a torture. Moreover, the dim yellow light was quite harmful to one's vision. Now, with these magic stones, even at night, the castle could be brightly lit. Really? Agatha said disapprovingly, I think it can play a greater role in the laboratory. After all, if you want to continue to produce liquid oxygen at night, an open flame is too unsafe. 8 hours of work during the day is not enough, so you want to take the initiative to work overtime? Roland tilted his head. Ahem, let's first look at the magic stones in the other boxes. After a round of inspection, in addition to a variety of glowing stones of different shapes and brightness, there was also a box and a half of miscellaneous stones. According to the Ice Witch, although these were priceless treasures to outsiders, they were of the lowest grade among the magic stones. For example, the Warning Stone used to send out signals and the Pathfinding Stone used to locate. Obviously, I couldn't carry the experimental products in the stone tower of the Holy City alone. Moreover, I had basically left the Quest Society at that time, so I was responsible for transporting some unimportant things. What about these books? Roland pointed at the black books in the other boxes. Are they all experimental records? There's also a part of the general principles of the laws. Agatha's cheeks blushed, which was rare. I want to leave a copy for the new witches who open up the wasteland as a guide for promotion. What's there to be embarrassed about? Roland looked at her strangely and continued to rummage through the rest of the boxes. This wooden box is a little strange. Sylvie's words made his hands tremble and he quickly withdrew them. Is there a mechanism? No, there's a mezzanine inside. She scrutinized it. It's at the bottom. I didn't notice it before and thought it was just an ordinary partition. After Roland cleared out all the books in the box, the thick bottom was revealed. Anna easily cut open the sealed wooden board and took out a square iron box. What's this? He curiously lifted the iron box lid and saw a thick piece of metal inside. There were 4 brightly colored crystals inlaid on it. Just by looking at the shape, he knew they were different. Perhaps the Quest Society has left you a good inheritance. Agatha gasped. This is impossible. Her exaggerated reaction surprised the 4 witches. Roland quickly put the piece of metal back into the box. What's wrong? This is the sigil of God's will. The Ice Witch said in disbelief. How could Kagger get this thing? She looked at the wooden box several times. Did he steal it from the other witches of the Quest Society? It could also be that someone entrusted it to him when the convoy was attacked. Roland casually made up a story. It's been 400 years, it doesn't matter who the box belongs to. What is the sigil of God's will? Some magic stones can have additional effects when connected together, such as changing the nature of magic or increasing the effect. This is the main research content of the Quest Society. Agatha carefully held the silver-white metal in her hands. These connected magic stones are called sigil, and the sigil of God's will is the most powerful one. Its magic stones all come from senior demons, and there are only 3 or 4 of them in the entire tequila. Roland could not help but whistle. How powerful is it? It can raise your castle to the ground. The prince was stunned. But don't worry, it requires a lot of magic power. The more magic stones the sigil contains, the harder it is to activate. Agatha closed her eyes. 2 of the magic stones on the metal piece slowly lit up, but the 3rd one was still dim. After a while, she seemed to have exhausted a lot of energy. She panted and let go of her hands. At that time, only the top 2 chiefs of the Union could use the sigil of God's will. You mean transcendence? Agatha nodded. Roland thought for a while. Let Anna try. It's useless. She shook her head. The use of magic power by transcendence is completely different from that of ordinary witches. They are training all the time. Once they advance, their body's ability to contain magic power will definitely surpass what? Everyone clearly saw that in the blink of an eye, the 4 magic stones on the sigil that Anna took over lit up one by one. Then, the edge of the metal piece began to flow with a golden light, like a jumping lightning. The golden light became brighter and brighter, and the whole sigil looked like a newborn sun. Let go of it! Agatha exclaimed. The light disappeared in an instant, as if it had never appeared. Anna exhaled and gently put the sigil back into the metal box. It does consume a lot of magic power. I can probably only use it twice. The basement was silent for a moment. Chapter 391. Schilt. Sir, dinner is ready. Irene pushed open the door and bowed stiffly. Her voice was obviously a little reserved. This was the first time Philin had seen his wife like this. She had never been so nervous, even in front of the prince. Father? He looked at the knight who had been silent since he came back and asked in a probing tone. Well. Sir blinked, as if awakened from deep thought. Let's eat first. The dishes placed on the small table were particularly sumptuous. At first glance, it was obvious that his wife had specially made a trip to the convenience market. He smiled encouragingly at Irene and began to divide the bread as usual. He divided some large pieces of food into 4 equal portions. In addition to the 3 of them, there was also Irene's friend, May. When he came back, May was discussing the content of the play with Irene. After he introduced his father to them, most people would choose to leave at this time, but May did not. She just raised her eyebrows, bowed briefly, and stayed with Irene. She even took the initiative to stay for dinner, which was rare. This made him a little confused. In the past, when he wanted to thank her, he specially invited her to dinner, but she never agreed. However, at this moment, the light of dawn did not care so much. Although he looked calm on the surface, his heart was also a mess. On one hand, he was worried about his father's opinion of his wife, and on the other hand, he was worried about the attitude of the witch Agatha. From his father's disappointed expression, it could be seen that the head of the family was obviously very concerned about this matter, but he did not know how to comfort him. Several years of separation and distance had intensified this feeling of estrangement. In the end, he could only eat in silence. Fortunately, Miss May was there. Her topic of the play aroused his father's interest, and then she had a pleasant conversation with Sir about the customs of the king's city and the life of the nobles, which finally made the dinner less boring. And when it came to the discussion of the new play, Irene could also join in from time to time. His father even personally asked her about the performance, which made Philin secretly feel relieved. After dinner, May said goodbye. After helping his wife clean up the tableware, Sir called him to the study. "Your wife has made a good friend." "Do you mean Miss May?" Philin was slightly startled. "She is indeed a rare and outstanding actress. She was a great help to Irene in the play. The last time I went to Stronghold, I asked her to take care of me." No, I'm not talking about the play." Schilt sighed. "Didn't you notice? She has been showing off to me." "Show power?" Ferlin's eyes widened. Weren't the two of them chatting happily at the dining table? Ha ha ha. The old man could not help but laugh. He shook his head and said, "You really don't know how to deal with nobles." The story she told of King's City was about the legendary experience of a commoner woman interacting with a noble, and the content of the play was Cinderella. Even when she talked about the politics of the upper class, it was about His Royal Highness's intention to take back the fief. "I think she must know that you were willing to sever ties with your family to be with Irene. Otherwise, she wouldn't have contradicted me with every word." "Is that so?" Sir Schilt smiled. Compared to being afraid of status, titles, and other empty titles, one's actions are obviously more important. After listening to what she said, I had more or less figured out Miss Agatha's situation. Regardless of whether the ancestor had lied or not, we had already returned the item she entrusted us with. Even if Ancestor Agatha isn't willing to accept us, we can still serve her in another way. At this point, he let out a long sigh. "I don't believe in such a saying, but after seeing you and Irene's life, I suddenly feel that such efforts may not be in vain." "Thank you." The affirmation in his father's voice made Philin's eyes tear up. Even though he was very decisive in breaking off their relationship, he still hoped that this marriage would be recognized by the family. However, Knight's next sentence made him freeze on the spot. "Have you ever considered returning to the Schilt family?" "What?" "No, you." The light of dawn could not react at all. He opened his mouth, but did not know what to say. Return to the family? Why did father suddenly mention this? The old sir said slowly, "Since the original decision was a mistake, it's not too late to change it." After a long time, Philin hesitantly said, "I think the current job is very good, and life in the town is also." "I'm not asking you to return to Longsong Stronghold as a knight," Schilt interrupted. "You should understand what I mean." He said word by word, "I want you to inherit the family." The light of dawn swallowed his saliva. "My brother, Miso Schilt is not a good successor," Sir said openly. "He originally wanted to become a famous knight in the western region like you, but since the Duke was defeated, he has lost his direction. As a family of the losers, we should try our best to be loyal to the new Castellan, but he is too close to the other 4 families, and no matter how I discipline him, I can't restrain him." "You can guess the reason." "Because he will be the next head of the family," Philin thought. Since he had left the family, his father had no choice but to let Miso inherit the family. This was probably the reason why he was treated coldly when he returned to the Eltek mansion after so many years. This has nothing to do with talent and knowledge. Talent can be cultivated and knowledge can be taught, but a suitable successor should know how to observe the wind direction, his father continued. Sir Perrault has announced His Highness Roland's new policy. Combined with Miss May's performance of New City in Longsong Stronghold, I suspect that he will soon turn the western region into a whole. It's not clear whether the four families will easily accept this change, but the wind direction is not calm. At this time, the most important thing to do is to wait and see, rather than be used as a stone to explore the road. Philin had also heard about this news. His Highness never concealed his intentions and policies, and even publicized them to the people in advance before implementation, including the official construction of Border Town. However, he did not want to participate in the struggle for the head of the family. Even if his father said so, Miso would certainly not give up. Philin was very clear about his brother's character. He finally shook his head. Sorry, father, I'm not asking you to make a choice now, Sir waved his hand. After all, I'm still alive and well. With me around, the family won't go too far. His smile looked a little old. If Miso can understand this, I won't say anything more. I just hope that if the family is in danger, you can help Schilt, for the sake of your mother and me. This time, Philin could not say no. Chapter 392. After washing up, Paper wrung the towel dry and hung it on the snow-covered balcony. The towel would be completely frozen in a day, and when she used it the next day, all she had to do was rub and pat it repeatedly to remove the ice. Of course, she could also use her ability to quickly evaporate the water in a warm room, but that would reduce the number of times she practiced every day. Paper knew that the amount of magic power in her body was among the lowest among the witches, so she had to use it precisely. After she finished cleaning, there was a knock on the door. Almost every day at this time, Sister Vendi would bring her to the castle hall for breakfast. Coming right away. Paper happily opened the door, and as expected, it was Vendi standing outside. She hugged her affectionately and sniffed her cheek. Not bad. You're clean. Hee hee. Paper grinned and pulled Wendy's hand as they walked towards the hall. She had been in Border Town for almost half a month, and had basically gotten used to the lifestyle in the castle. She didn't have to leave the shack early to look for food, and she didn't have to worry about the firewood being stolen. All the time she spent on filling her stomach and keeping warm was freed up. Instead, she used it to practice magic power and study. She had only fantasized about such a life when she was chatting with her companions. The only people who didn't have to worry about survival were the sons and daughters of the great noble families. Paper had never thought that she would have such a day. Vendi's palm was soft and warm, a feeling she had never experienced in the slums. It was as if someone was constantly thinking about and caring for her. She wished she could stay in this warm place forever. If this was a dream, she would rather never wake up. Walking into the hall, Paper saw that the witches weren't eating at the long table as usual. Instead, they were huddled around a wall, chattering non-stop. She blinked curiously, but was too embarrassed to ask Vendi what they were doing. The latter seemed to see through her thoughts and laughed. The sisters are all testing their combat effectiveness. Combat effectiveness? Paper was slightly startled. What is that? You don't need to pay attention to the strange words coming out of His Highness' mouth. Vendi bent down, lifted the little girl up and placed her on her shoulder. Do you see that silver piece of metal? It was said to be a relic of the Witch Kingdom more than 400 years ago. It was also a weapon used by extraordinaires in battle. Only those with strong magic power could activate its power. That's why His Highness placed it in the hall so that everyone can test their magic power level, or in other words, to satisfy the curiosity of our sisters. Being able to light up 4 magic stones in one go is equivalent to having the power of a divine will. Paper was extremely confused. The Witch Kingdom. Superhuman. Magic stones? She was momentarily at a loss for words she had never heard before, but this did not affect the shock brought by the scene in front of her. She saw the witches taking turns to place their hands on the metal pieces, causing the inlaid gems to emit bright rays of light, like colorful stars. It looked extremely incredible. "I can light up too," shouted Lightning, who was about her age. On her shoulder was a plump pigeon. Paper remembered that it was also a witch called Maggie. 2.5, coo. The pigeon chirped proudly. "Hey, you're taller than me." "That's impossible." "You want to try too?" Vendi laughed. "I don't think you can do it now. You haven't learned how to infuse magic power into magic stones, let alone activate the sigil. But His Highness has stipulated that this is a compulsory course for witches, so you'll soon have a stone of light for practice." "A crystal-clear gemstone that can even emit light?" Paper suddenly became excited and nodded at Vendi. "I'll practice hard." "Good girl." Vendi smiled and rubbed her cheek. "Eat first. Only when you're full will you have the strength to practice." After finishing her oatmeal, Paper returned to the witch house and began her daily practice. Vendi told her that everything in this world was made up of invisible little balls. Material changes were also the separation and joining of the little balls. Her ability was to accelerate this process, not simply melt ice and snow or cool hot water. Although she didn't quite understand the meaning of Vendi's words, she still followed Vendi's instructions meticulously. She felt the magic power contained in her body and released it evenly. Her early life in the slums had taught her that the reason she could live such a good life with everyone was because His Highness needed the power of witches. This was also her only value. If she didn't want to be abandoned, she had to do her best. Suddenly, Paper felt a sharp pain in her abdomen. The magic power in her body trembled as if it was about to break out. She couldn't help but groan. "What's wrong?" asked Vendi, who was beside her. "No, nothing." She shook her head. "My magic power seemed to be out of control." "Out of control?" Wendy pondered for a moment. "Do you remember when you became a witch?" "It was probably winter," Paper said in a low voice. "I don't remember the exact date. It's already the end of autumn, and winter is only a few days away." Vendi stopped smiling. As the day of awakening approaches, the magic power in your body becomes more active. This is also a sign of a backlash. You should rest first. I'll call Nightingale over. She can see the changes in your body. She walked to the door, then turned around and added, "Don't worry. For the witches of Border Town, this is no longer a matter of life and death." Vendi's guess was confirmed. 3 days later, Paper welcomed her second day of awakening. Lying on the big bed, she looked around at the circle of witches who came to visit her. Listening to their words of comfort, she suddenly had the urge to cry. In her memory, the pain of being burned by magic power during her first awakening seemed to be less unbearable. "Since you've only practiced for a short period of time, I can't guarantee that the pain of the backlash will be completely eliminated." Vendi sat on the bed and stroked her hair. "But compared to the torment of the day of adulthood, this pain is nothing. You should be able to endure it. Remember, don't ever think of giving up, and don't let yourself lose consciousness." Paper nodded. She didn't dare to answer, afraid that if she opened her mouth, she would cry uncontrollably. She didn't want everyone to see her humiliated appearance. Living in the slums, crying was the weakest expression. Only those who had given up struggling would do such a thing. Paper closed her eyes and waited for that moment to come. When she opened her eyes, it was already white outside the window. The backlash was much weaker than she had imagined, so much so that the various rescue methods that everyone had prepared could not be used. When she woke up, she felt that her body was full of magic power. Subtle changes seemed to have taken place throughout her body. Her eyes could see further, and her hands and feet were stronger. After washing her cheeks, Vendi's knock on the door came right on time. "I'm here." Paper happily opened the door and took her hand. This time, however, Vendi did not lead her to the castle hall. Instead, they went to the 3rd floor, where the Lord's office was. The gray-haired lord smiled and handed her a piece of parchment. From today onwards, you are an official member of the Witch Union. Chapter 393. After entering winter, the heavy snow actually calmed down a lot. Roland hummed a tune as he looked at the 3 manuscripts on the table. They were the trial and production plan for the new ammunition, the design plan for the new generation of light weapons, and the construction project for the wizard tower. The first 2 were the products he had been thinking about for a long time. Now, with Agatha's refrigeration and temperature control, the town's nitric acid production had greatly increased, and the stability of the large-scale production of nitroglycerin had also been solved. The conditions for the production of double-base propellant were basically met. Although he knew that this propellant was made by dissolving nitrocotton in nitroglycerin, and finally obtaining a viscous jelly-like substance that could be sliced or granulated, the specific ratio still needed to be tested by an alchemist. Fortunately, Kyle Sichi was now very proficient in quantitative and qualitative testing. If this task was entrusted to him, he should be able to get the results within a week or 2. Since he wanted to produce a new propellant, the development of a new light weapon naturally had to be arranged on the agenda. Compared to the large caliber will used at the beginning, the double-base propellant could achieve the equivalent lethality with a small amount of weight. Therefore, in terms of comprehensive power and cost-performance ratio, the new small-caliber automatic weapon was the inevitable choice. Of course, the specific parameters needed to be further determined according to Anna's results. Roland drank a mouthful of hot tea and placed the 3rd manuscript in front of him. This was also the thing he was most interested in at the moment. Compared to the previous plans, the contents of this document seemed extremely uncoordinated. At Agatha's request, he planned to build a wizard tower on the other side of the witch house for the research and development of sigil. Just think about it, a towering wizard tower in the midst of a forest of chimneys and factories. This feeling was simply extremely fashionable. Roland couldn't help but laugh out loud. Nightingale, who was gnawing on dried fish at the side, rolled her eyes at him. Are sigil that interesting? The Witch Kingdom has many sigil, but in the end, it's still lost to the demons. But there is no lack of very interesting things in it. The prince took out a thick leather book from a drawer. It was a translation of the sigil encyclopedia left behind by the Quest Society, which recorded all the formulas obtained by the Quest Society in more than 200 years. To him, this was a new continent. After Agatha finished translating, Roland spent almost the entire night on the book. Looking at the dazzling list of uses and combinations of the magic stone, it was as though he was assembling the rune language. When the chief alchemist received elementary chemistry, he probably had the same excitement when he read those chemical formulas. When it came to knowledge that one had never seen before, even if it was just a superficial knowledge, it would still be extremely tempting. For example, Nightingale leaned over. Like this. Roland pointed to a line on the page. The ancient witches called it the sigil of listening. It can be used for long-distance communication, similar to the sigil of tracking. Once it's made, it can work even when separated. He moved his finger down a little. The materials are also very simple. All you need is an echo stone and a marking stone. According to the description in the book, this kind of sigil could be used for dozens of miles. Although it couldn't compare to the mobile phones that were supported by signal towers and satellites, it was enough to be used as a short-distance walkie-talkie. Is that so? Nightingale peeked at it and reached out to move his finger to the page on the right. But it says here that the echo stone comes from the fearsome demon, and the marking stone is commonly found in Devil's Town. How are you going to get these 2 kinds of magic stones? No, we already have the materials, Roland said excitedly. The red crystal lightning found in the ruins of the stone tower is an echo stone. As for the marking stone, it's also a component of the sigil of tracking. Tilly brought several sets of these sigil with her. You just need to split one of them. Even if Agatha can make it, you can only get 1 sigil of listening at most. Just let her try it out. Anyway, when I fight with the demons in the future, I will definitely get more and more magic stones. In the past, he did not have the conditions to study the application of magic power. Now that he had the technical support of Agatha, he certainly would not let go of this almost free resource. All right. Nightingale shrugged. What about the sigil of God's will? What magic stones does it need? This. I remember it's on the last page. Roland flipped to the last page of the book. By the way, what's the result of your combat test? Nightingale was stunned. After a while, she spat out 2 words, it's a secret. Was she shocked by Anna? Found it. It's here. He pouted. The 4 magic stones needed are all written as unknown. Probably because the Quest Society considered confidentiality, they did not record it in written form. But according to Agatha, most of these magic stones came from senior demons. Even if they were written down, I'm afraid not many people would be able to get them. And then you hung such a precious thing in the hall. Nightingale snorted. If those transcendents knew about it, they would probably be so angry that they would come back to life. Because it was not a precious thing at all. It was probably equivalent to 12 kilograms. Roland smiled and did not answer. This time, he waited until Agatha was done with the acid production for the day before he called her to his office. This is the mage tower I designed for you. Take a look. Roland put up a sketch. The basement is the warehouse. There are 3 floors above it. They are the apprentice lab, the tower master lab, and the office. Wait, why is it called a mage tower? Agatha frowned. I just want a chemistry lab like Mr. Kyle's. It's just a little more spacious and transparent. Also, it's very troublesome to build a stone tower like this. Tequila had to build towers because of the small area of the city. You have a lot of empty space here. That's not fashionable. Roland shouted in his heart. Anyway, the construction problem is not difficult to solve. Do you have any other requirements besides the above functions? No. She spread out her hands. If you insist. Very well. Roland put down the sketch and then told her what he thought in the morning. Can you complete the sigil alone? No. Agatha shook her head. Although the sigil is connected to the magic stone, the magic conduction material is very complicated. Most importantly, it needs the demon's blood. The prince could not help but be stunned. What? You heard it right. It must be fresh demon's blood. She said in a low voice. When the Quest Society was exploring the nature of magic, they did tens of thousands of experiments. In the end, it was proved that the nature of the flesh and blood of witches, demons, and demonic beasts is very different, and can play completely different roles. Witches, flesh and blood. Roland was shocked. He suddenly realized the meaning behind these words. He could not help but ask, what role can they play? God's punishment army. Agatha said expressionlessly. Chapter 394. Roland widened his eyes and said, with dead ones. No, she interrupted. Like the demon's blood, it has to be fresh. He heard Nightingale gasp behind him. This is the top secret of the Quest Society. I left the stone tower of the Holy City not long after the experiment began. The only thing I know is that they used the blood of old and weak witches, mixed it with God's stones of retaliation, and injected it into the bodies of mortals, thus changing the bodies of mortals. Agatha's voice was a little heavy. From the notebook you found, this research should have been a success. How much blood? More than half. The witch's answer made Roland's heart sink. And the blood has to come from the same person, otherwise the magic power contained in it will conflict with each other, greatly reducing the effectiveness. She paused for a moment. You're right. Every time we conduct an experiment, a witch will die, and it's also very difficult for mortals to withstand the erosion of the weakened blood of magic. In the beginning, no one could survive. Many members objected to this, believing that mortals could not obtain magic power at all. If it wasn't for the insistence of Chief Alice, this plan might not have been carried out to the end. But now the church has a large number of God's punishment army. According to Tilly's information, the number of scourge may be about 500 to 1,000. Roland frowned. Assuming the success rate in the notebook refers to increasing the conversion rate to 100%, it means at least half of the witches died, and I don't think that group of people should be able to gather so many old witches. So the reason the church captured and bred witches was to drain their blood and use it to create powerful extraordinary warriors? Roland felt the hand on his shoulder tighten involuntarily. Damn it, hundreds of witches with all kinds of strange powers died in the holy city of Hermes for nothing, and they have to bear the name of the fallen, despised by the world. Such a stupid organization must be destroyed, even if their original intention was to fight against the demons. Don't worry, I'll stop them, Roland said word by word. After Agatha left, Nightingale came out of the mist and appeared in front of him. She gritted her teeth and said, I didn't expect the God's punishment army to be like this. If the church was really transformed from the Union, then their chief must be a lunatic. Indeed, he sighed, so it makes sense that the church would adopt female orphans and abandoned babies everywhere. They are just collecting materials for the army. Perhaps the vilification of witches as the devil's minions was also part of the plan to justify the punishment of witches. Nightingale didn't reply, but her face was filled with anger. Roland grabbed her hand worriedly. Are you going to cause trouble for the church alone? She shook her head. I'm not that stupid. If they could really be overthrown by a witch, someone would have done so long ago. The prince was slightly relieved. The ultimate purpose of the church creating the God's punishment army is to strengthen their own strength, so if there are witches with extraordinary abilities, they will certainly not be used for blood supply. Facing these witches who are loyal to the church, even if we hide in the mist, we can't guarantee our safety. When the war with the church starts, it is the safest way to advance step by step with the first army's firepower. No matter what the enemy is, in front of bullets, there is no difference. He paused. I said, in the new world, witches will be like ordinary people, living a normal life without barriers. Yes, Nightingale responded in a low voice and put her forehead on Roland's head. I believe you can do all this. After sending paper back to the witch house, Vendi returned to the Lord's castle with satisfaction. Recently, she felt that her life had been very fulfilling. Although her previous life had been quite comfortable, she always felt that something was missing. Now that there was a particularly well-behaved little girl by her side who was full of admiration for her, nothing could make her feel happier. Now that winter had arrived, the time of year when witches were most likely to awaken, there might be more newcomers joining the big family of the Witch Union in the next few months, and the children that needed her to take care of would also increase. Just thinking about it made her look forward to it. Vendi gently hummed a song that she had heard from His Highness. When she opened the bedroom door, she couldn't help but be stunned by the scene in front of her. Oh my God, what did I see? Nightingale was actually sitting in front of the desk, flipping through the book, Natural Science Theoretical Foundation. Did she quarrel with His Highness Roland? Ahem, Vendi coughed twice. I'm back. Roland nodded without answering. From the side, she looked very depressed, as if her sadness was written on her face. It seemed that it was true. Vendi walked forward, patted her on the shoulder, and softly comforted her. Love is like this, sometimes there will always be disputes, but in fact, when you think about it, it's not a big deal, you just need to sleep. What are you talking about? Nightingale frowned. You and His Highness, the quarrel is only temporary, you don't have to take it to heart. Why would I quarrel with him? She said while holding her forehead. No? Vendi was startled. Then why did you suddenly want to study? Nightingale took a deep breath and repeated the experiment of the God's punishment army that Agatha had revealed. I just feel that I need to become a little stronger, so that I can do more in the battle to overthrow the church in the future. So that's what happened. After listening to her, Vendi nodded solemnly. I didn't expect that the purpose of building the monastery was actually for the witch's blood. If ashes hadn't suddenly awakened as an extraordinary and attracted all the guards' attention, I'm afraid I would have become one of the corpses. Nightingale was right, perhaps the environment of the castle was too comfortable, so she completely relaxed. She suddenly realized that the enemy was still in front of her, whether it was the church or the demons. The threat had not been completely eliminated, but she had not made any progress for a long time. Although her magic power was growing slowly, her fighting skills and wind-making ability were not much different from when she was in the Witch Cooperation Association, let alone evolution. Compared to her sisters who studied hard, such as Mystery Moon, Hummingbird, and Echo, she seemed to be too lazy. Obviously, she was a senior, but the sigil of God's will could not even light up 2 magic stones. If this went on, she was afraid that she would not be qualified to stand in front of them as a senior. You're right, I also have to work hard. Vendi took a deep breath. She decided that from today on, she would be like the other witches, spending 2 hours every night to study the knowledge of His Highness before going to bed. After quickly washing up in the bathroom, she returned to the room again, only to find that Nightingale had already fallen asleep on the desk. Chapter 395. The temporary shipyard next to the Redwater River was crowded with people. Everyone knew that a strange ship was being built in the wooden shed. Its shell was like a huge bathtub and was made of gray cement. Once the cement solidified, it was no different from a stone. When it was thrown into the water, apart from a splash, not even a shadow could be seen. The craftsmen who came to work here gave it an appropriate name, bathtub ship. Today was the day when the first 2 prototypes were launched. The crowd of onlookers was roughly divided into 2 groups. One group was the new residents of Border Town. They were quite curious about the news, or they couldn't believe it. With a skeptical attitude, they came to see something new. Among them, there were many fishermen and sailors from the eastern and southern territories. The other group were the local residents. They had long been accustomed to the various miracles that His Highness had created, and they had also heard of the little town from before. They had braved the snow to gather here, just to see the prince that they worshipped. Kakuzim was the former. When His Highness posted the news and the new recruitment order on the bulletin board in the square, he said that he had to come here no matter what. Vader had no choice but to ask for a leave from Sir Carter and accompany him. He was unfamiliar with the place and the snow was heavy. He was really worried about letting Kakuzim go alone to a place where people gathered. If he was pushed and fell, it would be an incurable injury for the old man. You underestimate me, child. The old man waved his hand, indicating that Vader did not need to follow him. I've also been through a lot. Although I'm old, I'm not much weaker than you. Yes, Vader said disapprovingly. Anyway, I've already asked for leave. It's too late to say anything. I just don't understand. Why do you have to see this thing go into the water? Isn't it just a ship? But you said it was made of gray stone. Kakuzim shook his head. How can a bathtub-sized stone float on the water these days? It's all my fault for being too talkative, Vader thought to himself. I didn't know how we ended up talking about the announcement in the square when we were chatting. Perhaps His Highness was just exaggerating. A wooden ship is probably partly made of cement, right? That's even more impossible, the old man insisted. Think about it, when was this wooden shed built? It seems like more than a month ago. That's right. It was even earlier than when you were recruited as a police officer. When we moved into the inner city of the town, this place was still empty. His beard trembled. It took a month to build the shed. Doesn't that mean that His Highness only used half a month to build his first ship? Is there something wrong? Vader was puzzled. Of course not. Cried Kakuzim. In the name of Poseidon. I have never seen a ship that can be built in half a month. This has nothing to do with size. As long as it is a sailboat, just processing the ribs will take more than a month. It needs to wait for the wood to be completely air-dried before bending it with steam. This process is extremely troublesome and cannot be completed in a short time. Vader was astonished. Why are you so familiar with shipbuilding? I used to be a captain, child, the old man exhaled. When I was young, I often carried a large amount of cargo through the Seawanshire and the port of Clearwater, and also to the Kingdom of Dawn and the Fjord Islands. Later, because of some things, I ended up in this state. You've never told me this before. Vader widened his eyes. You've never asked, child. Kakuzim shrugged. All right. Vader shifted his gaze to the shipyard. So what you're really curious about is the technology that His Highness can build a sailboat in half a month. No captain wouldn't be curious, he said, stroking his beard. If His Highness isn't lying, do you know what this means? In a year or two, he'll be able to run his fleet on all the rivers in Greycastle. Vader's heart skipped a beat. Are you planning to? The old man smiled. I can't just eat your oatmeal for free all the time. Of course His Highness wouldn't lie, someone suddenly said. And it's not a sailboat. Vader turned around. The speaker was a young man who sounded like a local resident of the Western region. Not a sailboat? That's right. It can sail without sails, and it's faster than any sailboat, the young man said proudly. Have you seen the steam engine that emits white fog in the mine? The kind that can easily drag a basket of or out of the mine. These cement boats are powered by it. According to His Highness, they're all steam boats. They can sail without sails. Kakuzim questioned. Boy, what nonsense are you talking about? If a boat doesn't have sails, it can only be moved by oarsmen. It can't be faster than other sailboats. Besides, they haven't even entered the water. You haven't even seen them. How do you know they can move? Of course I've seen them, the young man said with a grin. You're new here, so it's normal that you don't know. In the summer, I modified a steamboat for the caravan across the channel. But that boat was still made of wood, so it's not as durable as these stone boats. Vader wanted to say something, but Kakuzim's eyes suddenly lit up. He pointed in the direction of the shipyard. Look, His Highness is coming out. There was a burst of cheers from the crowd. Everyone raised their hands to greet their lord. Prince Roland stepped onto the temporary wooden platform beside the shipyard. After saying a few congratulatory words, he announced the launch of the new boat. Amid the rhythmic cheers, the workers took apart the side of the wooden shed facing the Redwater River. A 40-meter-long gray boat slid down the embankment along the snow and plunged into the cold water. Vader's heart skipped a beat. He almost thought that the boat would sink to the bottom of the river, but to his surprise, after the rest of the boat entered the water, the bow of the boat rose up again, creating a big splash. Once again, the crowd burst into enthusiastic applause. My God, it really floated up. Kakuzim was stunned for a moment. But is it really made of stone? Vader had the same question. The surface of the bathtub boat looked too smooth, like a finely polished granite slab. But there was no trace of it being pieced together. The whole boat was a seamless whole. The cabin without a deck was very shallow, so it was impossible to sleep in. The bottom was very flat, so there was no way to fix the mast. Just like everyone said, it was completely a bathtub. But no matter what, His Highness had indeed built the boat in half a month. He looked at Kakuzim and found that his eyes were shining with excitement. I want to apply for the position of captain, the old man said. Chapter 396. Amidst the cheers of his subjects, Roland watched with satisfaction as the second concrete boat slid into the water. These two concrete boats looked simple, but in fact, they were much better than the original little town. For the first time, a dense steel frame was added to its interior, and the quality of the cement had improved significantly. Its overall strength was several times higher than that of the little town. In order to speed up the construction, Roland had reserved slots and interfaces for the steam engine, transmission mechanism, and paddle wheels when designing the hull. When the time came, he only needed to weld the corresponding fixing bolts on these metal parts to achieve rapid assembly, and the installation would be like gluing a model together. At the same time, the template had been changed from temporary masonry to an iron mold, which not only guaranteed the density of the poured concrete, but also improved its waterproof performance. It could also ensure that every boat was basically the same, so there would be no deviation when installing the power system. In order to obtain a complete template, he had scrapped at least 7 or 8 experimental boats. Fortunately, cement was no longer a scarce product. From grinding the stones to mixing them into the kiln, the steam engine had replaced all manual work. It could be said that this was one of the few industrial projects in Border Town that did not rely on the power of witches to produce it on a large scale. With sufficient materials, reliable templates, and skilled workers, the only thing limiting the production of the hull was the hardening speed of the cement. However, with paper's accelerated response, the cement boat, which originally needed to be placed for 1 or 2 months, could be launched in 1 day. In other words, as long as Roland wanted to, this shipyard could launch a white-board boat every 2 or 3 days. If the speed of the steam engine manufacturing and crew training could keep up, he could have a huge transport fleet in a short period of time, so that the entire Redwater River would be filled with his own cement boats. Even the legendary dumplings could not be compared to this. This was the charm of industry. Now that the hull was completed, the next step was to install the power components. The machinery and equipment were basically the same as the modified boats of the Crescent Moon Bay Chamber of Commerce. The craftsman already had practical experience, so he was not worried. "I don't understand. Why do you want to tell this kind of thing to the people?" Nightingale asked. "To promote the strength of the country." Roland smiled slightly. "Ah. I mean, to witness the earth-shaking changes in Border Town." He touched his chin and said, "Before you saw Little Town, I'm afraid you didn't expect a stone ship to float on the water. The same is true for the people." After achieving the impossible, their sense of identity with the town will become stronger and stronger. This kind of improvement in mentality is all-encompassing, and it may even evolve into the belief that there is nothing they cannot do. "I don't really understand." Nightingale's voice was a little doubtful. "Just think of it as a means of publicity," Roland said with a smile. In this era, the nobles and the people only celebrated during celebrations or major events. However, these 2 events were basically related to the nobles. If it was not for the free porridge, the participation of the people would not be high. The concrete boat was the result of the collective cooperation of hundreds of workers, who themselves were part of the festival. In addition, as a member of the territory, after seeing the miracles that the territory produced continuously, their confidence and sense of identity would also gradually increase. This was the so-called mentality of a great country in later generations. The prosperity of a territory would inevitably cause positive changes in the mentality of its citizens. A week later, Roland received more than 20 townspeople who had applied for the position of captain in the castle hall. At first, when Berev reported the number of people, Roland was greatly surprised. He did not expect that there were so many high-end talents among the refugees. It was not until he read the detailed report that he was dumbfounded. There were many fishermen who operated rafts and small fishing boats, and even boatmen who made a living by ferrying. In a sense, they could indeed be considered to have the experience of being a captain. Among all the applicants, there were only 3 who had the experience of operating a single-masted boat on the river. One of them even claimed that he had been a merchant fleet commander and had lived on the sea for a long time. After thinking for a while, Roland finally decided to recruit all the people. Because steamboats and sailboats belonged to completely different systems, they were completely different to operate. Even experienced old captains might not be able to quickly master the steam paddle boat. Besides, he knew nothing about sailing. Instead of blindly commanding them, it was better to let them understand and learn by themselves. Since they were starting from scratch, they had to have the determination and courage to explore. "I have already read your application." Roland swept his eyes over the group of people kneeling on one knee in the hall. Today, I called you here to tell you that you have passed the initial examination and have gloriously become the first batch of trainee captains in Border Town. All of you stand up. Yes. Your Highness. The crowd cautiously stood up and looked at each other. It seemed that they were quite confused by the term, trainee captain. The prince took the initiative to explain, trainee means that you are not an official position. Before you actually board the ship, you will only receive half of the salary stated on the notice, which is 10 silver royals per month. The first 2 months will be a learning period. You will be familiar with the performance of the new ship, the operating methods and the operation process. The 3rd month will be a trial run to test your mastery. If you pass, you will be promoted to an official captain, and your salary will be paid in full. If you don't want to accept, you can leave now. No one in the group moved. After a while, an old man suddenly spoke, Your Highness, may I ask who will teach us and who will test our qualifications for promotion? Roland glanced at him with interest. He was probably the fleet commander who claimed to be experienced. His name seemed to be Kakuzim or something. If he remembered correctly, he was a relative of a policeman who had performed well in an assassination case 2 months ago. From the old man's tone, Roland could tell that he did not think that anyone could teach them how to sail a ship. In fact, there was no one. The teachers will be yourselves. The prince nodded. These words caused a stir in the crowd. Your Highness, what do you mean? Kakuzim asked in confusion. How much do you know about the steam engine? Roland asked. Unsurprisingly, no one could answer. The steam ship is a new kind of ship. Past experience is not very useful, so you will have to explore and learn on your own. Of course, I will also send craftsmen from the steam engine factory to help you familiarize yourself with the machine. He paused. The inspection method is very simple. If you can lead a group of sailors to move the ship and complete a transportation mission, you will be considered qualified. Although the saying, 10 years of land, 100 years of navy, was exaggerated, it also showed that it was not easy to build a navy. If this group of people could familiarize themselves with the operation of the steam ship, they would definitely be able to train a large number of suitable crew for the western region in the future. When it was time to build the steam-powered shallow water gunships, they would be able to be used directly. He was very curious about what kind of army would be formed when the civilian crew and the artillerymen joined forces. Chapter 397. Leaf was walking between the treetops and the green leaves, looking for Lightning and Maggie. In fact, it was not accurate to say that she was walking. Her body had blended into the dense forest, and it was only her sight that moved. This feeling was very wonderful. She felt that she was more at ease than a bird, at least, if a bird didn't flap its wings, it would fall to the ground, but she didn't. As long as she maintained this form, she could go from one end of the forest to the other in the blink of an eye. Of course, compared to the whole concealing forest, the area under Leaf's control was only a drop in the ocean. Since her ability had evolved, she had set her sights on the concealing forest to the west of Border Town. If she could bring this vast forest under her control, whether it was fighting against demonic beasts or collecting supplies, it would be a great help to His Highness Roland. There weren't many ways she could repay His Highness. In addition to improving the crops, this was the only thing she could do. Compared to the castle's back garden, this was a real forest, and its complexity was far greater than the ecosystem composed of olive trees and grapevines. Every inch of the land was hiding many creatures. If you looked down along the roots of the plants, you could feel dormant animals, squirming reptiles, decaying corpses, and small gurgling water sources. In order to avoid losing her mind, she carefully expanded her territory. Starting from the western wall, she fused a little bit every day, and when she was completely adapted, she added a new piece of forest. At this speed, in 2 or 3 years, she would be able to cover the whole concealing forest with her consciousness. After a while, Leaf found the 2 people who were hunting in the forest. If she didn't fly close to the treetops, but walked in the snow, she would be able to find them faster. I found a prey, Leaf said, shaking a branch. Ah, Lightning trembled, then patted her chest. You scared me. Goo, goo. Maggie nodded. Sorry. Leaf made her figure emerge from the trunk, like a new branch. Is this better? Well, at least it doesn't seem like I'm talking to a ghost. Lightning lightly landed on the ground. Can you appear in any place in the forest? As long as it's within my control, she nodded. Maggie landed on Leaf's back and paced back and forth. She even pecked at the part where her body was connected to the trunk. You actually grew into the tree, coo. Leaf felt an itch on her back and couldn't help but laugh. This is my ability. It feels a little strange, coo. How dare you say that others are weird? You can transform into a giant demon bird yourself. Lightning rolled her eyes at the pigeon and then looked at Leaf. Where's the prey? Come with me, she said, tilting her head. Since it was impossible to maintain a human form while moving, Leaf simply made vines stand up on the ground to guide them forward. What kind of prey? Lightning asked. A wild boar, from the heart of the forest, she answered. Are you sure you want to do it yourself? I can tie it up with a vine and throw it at the foot of the wall. Of course, explorers pursue more than just the results, the little girl said with her head held high. Sometimes the process is more memorable than the results. As long as there's meat to eat, coo. Leaf couldn't help but raise the corner of her mouth. Before she integrated with the misty forest, the two of them were already frequent visitors here. They practiced their magic by hunting in the forest, and Maggie would carry all the prey they got back to the castle. Now half of the meat on the table was provided by them. Look, there it is, Leaf said. She saw a huge wild boar squatting by the stream, licking the cold water. Its fangs were thick and sharp, and its bristling mane was almost as long as a finger. It looked very difficult to deal with. If a hunter encountered such a beast, he would generally retreat, but for a witch, it was just a good meal. I'm going, Lightning said, pulling out her dagger. Don't you need a gun? Leaf asked in surprise. That would be too unchallenging. She touched her nose confidently and rushed straight to the target. Come on, coo. The little girl's figure was like a golden light, and in the blink of an eye, she pounced on the head of the wild boar from behind, and then rose up. The boar suddenly shook its head and burst into a high-pitched scream. Missed? No. Leaf noticed that one of the wild boar's eyes had become a bloody hole. It seemed that Lightning intended to use her flexibility to eliminate the enemy's counterattack, and then use a war of attrition to slowly drain the prey's vitality. In front of Lightning's air superiority, the wild boar was as clumsy as a stone. It didn't take long for it to lose the ability to resist and collapsed in the snow. She whistled. How was it? Well done. Leaf controlled the vines to entangle the wild boar's hind legs and hung it up. Let's drain its blood first. His Highness said that meat without blood stains is more delicious. Gulp, Maggie swallowed. Tonight we can have a full meal, coo. Wait. Leaf suddenly felt that another creature had broken into the forest. She looked at the edge of the controlled area and saw two gray wolves approaching. Something was wrong. She frowned. This kind of beast usually lived in the depths of the forest. Even in winter, it was rare for them to run so close to border town. She was hesitating whether to tell Lightning the news, when suddenly a familiar figure appeared in front of her. Leaf felt the hair on her body stand up, and the tragic battle in the barbarian land instantly came back to her mind. Demons. She saw two burly demons slowly moving in the direction of the city wall. They didn't wear magic stones on their arms, nor did they carry spears on their backs, as if they didn't carry any weapons. But Leaf noticed that they both wore a black iron glove. It was the weapon that killed Red Pepper and the others. Why did the demons come here? With great fear and uneasiness, she returned her consciousness to Lightning's side. Get out of here, the demons are coming. What? The two were slightly startled. After a brief description of what she saw, Leaf urged, hurry up, they don't have a mount, so they can't catch up with you two. I'll follow you later. To her surprise, Lightning hesitated for a moment, then shook her head and said, "I want to stay and fight with them." Fight? Leaf was stunned. Why? If we run away when we meet the enemy, how can we defeat them in the future? The little girl took a deep breath and pulled out a pistol from her waist. Dad said that I should get up from where I fell. I won't run away again. Chapter 398. It was never taboo for an explorer to take risks, but it was never reckless. Demons were not terrible. They could be killed, and they had a huge weakness: they had to rely on the red mist to survive. Leaf had killed a trapped demon with a crossbow, and Nightingale had killed an enemy in a very unfavorable situation. Lightning secretly encouraged herself that she could do it too. "We should report to His Highness first," Leaf said hurriedly. "Whether it's Nightingale or Ashes, they're much more skilled at dealing with demons than we are. By the time they get here, the demons may have already left." Lightning checked the cartridge of the pistol to make sure that every hole was filled with bullets. It's more risky to let such dangerous enemies wander around the border. I can stay and keep an eye on them. What if they go out of your control? The little girl insisted. If you stop them, you'll expose your own existence. It's better for the three of us to do it together. Leaf fell silent and seemed to be persuaded. Coo. Maggie stood on Lightning's head and flapped her wings. I know. She scratched the pigeon's neck. We'll each take one later. What did she say? Leaf asked. Lightning curled her lips. She said she wanted to crush their heads with her claws and then beat them into meat patties with her wings. Finally, she wanted to roast them over the bonfire and see if they were edible. She only said, "Coo," twice. Maggie questioned. That's the gist of it. The little girl nodded seriously. A good explorer should not only be courageous, but also be able to lead the whole team. When they were nervous, they should relax a little, and when they were relaxed, they should not lose their vigilance. Dad, I'll try my best to do what you said. Lightning flicked her wrist and closed the cartridge, trying not to show her nervousness. She pretended to be calm and said, "How far are they from here?" "About 300 meters, on our right," Leaf replied. If not for the forest, she would have been able to see the enemy from this distance. She thought that she undoubtedly had the advantage of striking first, and the range of a pistol was not something that a magic stone could compare to. You can trap demons with vines, right? Just like in the wildlands. I think it should be fine for the time being. Then we'll attack from the top, Lightning decided. This direction is the most difficult to be discovered by the enemy, and their attention will be temporarily on the vines, so we can end the battle in an instant. I understand. The Leaf's movement was a bit hesitant, probably because the experience of the Witch Cooperation Association had left too much of a shadow in Leaf's memory. But at this moment, Lightning couldn't care less about this. If she delayed any longer, the courage that she had worked so hard to summon would vanish. After all, it was she and Maggie who had to face the demon. Leaf, on the other hand, was completely hidden in the forest. No matter how the demons attacked the vines, they could not hurt her at all. Then let's go. Lightning soared into the sky. Goo! The pigeon followed closely behind. The forest instantly became a green and white block under their feet. The little girl pulled down the goggles that His Highness had given her, and felt a bit more courage in her heart. There they are. After searching for a while, Maggie, who had turned into a gray-tailed eagle, found the target. Under the gaze of the eagle's eyes, even a rabbit running in the snow could not escape her tracking. Lightning let out a long breath, and in her mind flashed the figure of Thunder and His Highness Roland. She shook her head, threw away the distracting thoughts, and held the gun with both hands. I'll take the left, you take the right, and when we're halfway down, you'll turn into a giant winged bird. Leave it to me, Goo. Go! The little girl shouted, and then began to dive. The cold wind whistled past her cheeks, and pierced her ears. She shrank her head into the scarf, recalled the shooting method taught by Nightingale, and held the gun horizontally in front of her. The effective range of a bullet was about 100 meters, but to ensure that it hit the target, the closer the better. If Leaf's information was correct, the iron gloves worn by the enemy must be inlaid with a lightning magic stone, and the firing range was similar to that of a witch, between 5 meters. Therefore, shooting from 7 or 8 meters away was the best choice. The enemy's figure became more and more clear, and she could already see the horrible head and scarlet mask on the enemy's body. Suddenly, a devil stopped, raised its head, and roared at the two of them. "Have I been discovered?" Lightning's heart sank. Why does it seem like the enemy is able to perceive my existence? At the same time, countless vines suddenly rose from the side of the devil, they wrapped around the enemy's legs, and continued to climb up, tightly surrounding the enemy. A white light flashed on Maggie's body, and in an instant, she turned into a huge monster, and at the same time, she dived down and let out a high-pitched roar. "Forget it," Lightning gritted her teeth and sped up again. When she was only 50 meters away from the enemy, she suddenly made a turn, and like a meteor, she fell straight behind the enemy. If she shot vertically, she could only hit the enemy's head, but shooting horizontally could greatly increase the target's area. This was also what Nightingale repeatedly emphasized, that in a situation where you were not sure, you should fire at the widest part of the enemy's body. The devil struggled to raise its right hand, which was entangled by the vines, and dazzling lightning burst out from the iron gloves. Lightning pulled the trigger almost at the same time, and a loud roar suddenly resounded over the forest. As she expected, the attack range of the magic stone was extremely limited. The blue-white arc of light disappeared in a flash, and with the sound of the gunshot, a dark red mist of blood burst out from the back of the devil. The bullet not only penetrated its body, but also rotated and smashed the gas tank on its back. Maggie, on the other hand, was in a much worse situation. Another demon's lightning directly hit the giant bird's body, causing sparks to appear. Maggie's roar turned into a scream, and her wings curled up. She then heavily smashed into the demon's body, raising a large amount of snowflakes. At the moment of impact, Lightning felt the ground tremble. Probably because the collision was too violent, the gas tank on the devil's body was crushed, and the red mist overflowed from the giant bird's body, which made the little girl's heart suddenly jumped. Leaf reacted immediately. Dozens of vines combined into one, and lifted Maggie away from the devil. The giant bird rolled twice in the snow, and then lay motionless on the ground. Lightning anxiously flew in front of her, holding her huge head and shaking it. "Maggie, wake up. Are you all right?" "Coo," a little numb. Maggie opened her eyes, as if she could no longer maintain her magic form, and changed back to her original appearance. "What happened?" Lightning checked her body up and down, and after confirming that she was all right, she was relieved. "It's good that you're all right." It seemed that in the form of a flying beast, Maggie would not be hurt by the blood mist. Moreover, after her body became larger, her resistance to damage had also increased. The electric arc had only knocked her out temporarily, and the demon had acted as a cushion when she fell to the ground. It seemed that the attack was frightening, but in fact, she was barely hurt. It could only be said that it was a blessing in misfortune. They looked dead. Leaf poked half of her body out of the trunk to check the two dead devils. "What should we do next?" "Take the bodies back," said Lightning. "His Highness should know what to do with them." Chapter 399. When Roland heard the news, he was startled. He didn't have time to ask in detail. He hurriedly followed Leaf to the castle's back garden, only to see Lightning unloading the two demon corpses from Maggie's back to the ground. "Your Highness, we won." Seeing the prince, the little girl jumped down and threw herself into his arms. "We defeated the demons." "Was no one hurt?" "No, everyone is fine." She looked up, her eyes sparkling with a "praise me quickly" light. If she had a tail, it would have been wagging. Roland let out a breath. Seeing her expression, he didn't want to ask why she didn't come back to report after seeing the demons, so he put this question aside for the time being. it's good that no one was hurt. So, what was the specific situation? After listening to the three people's answers, he finally figured out what had happened. The battle seemed easy, but in fact it was not small. If Maggie hadn't taken an electric arc and been safe, or if the demons hadn't broken free from Leaf's restraint, the consequences would have been unimaginable. Next time, don't do such a risky thing, Nightingale couldn't help but say. With Sylvie there, the enemy couldn't escape. It's better to leave the battle with the demons to us. But we won, Lightning pouted. That was also luck. Before the fight, did you expect that Maggie would be hit? Nightingale said mercilessly, the spear skills I taught you are so that you can protect your sisters in a crisis, not take them into danger. Yes. Her head drooped, I know. And you too. Nightingale then looked at Maggie. You knew that at this time you should have come back to report, but you still fooled around with her. If you make such a mistake again, don't even think about eating a piece of dried fish from me. Coo. Maggie's head also drooped. No wonder she was the strongest witch in Border Town. Roland looked at Nightingale with approval. Well, this matter will not be repeated again. Help me call Tilly and Agatha over. Next, it's time to check the loot. In the basement of the castle, 2 corpses lay flat on the cold stone floor. They had been stripped naked, and their torn clothes and belongings were neatly placed aside. These are the enemies in the Battle of Divine Will? Tilly asked, covering her nose. He doesn't look much stronger than an ordinary person. Ashes curled her lips. Agatha's face was gloomy. Don't underestimate them. Any devil, regardless of whether they have magic power or not, is a difficult opponent. When facing a senior demon, even a transcendent will choose to wear a god's stone of retaliation. She frowned and looked at Roland. Did they really appear near Border Town? Ah, almost. According to Leaf, they're less than 2 miles away from the town wall. Roland nodded and carefully looked at the corpses in front of him. They were extremely tall, standing at more than 2 meters tall. Their limbs were thick and strong, and their skin was light green. One of their limbs was severely deformed, and their entire chest cavity had collapsed. Their organs were overflowing from the cracks in their abdomen, as if they had been run over by a cement truck. Thinking of the battle narrated by Lightning, Roland could imagine how great the impact was. The other person was in a much better state. At least from the front, his appearance was intact. There were 2 holes in his body, and blue blood was still flowing out. Lightning fired 4 shots at the enemy, and 2 of the bullets hit the target. One of the bullets went straight through the chest, and there was no doubt that it was a fatal shot. It was understandable that human blood was red because it was rich in oxygen-carrying hemoglobin. The other demons did not need to breathe oxygen, so it was not strange that their blood was of a different color. It was not surprising that the shape of their bones was relatively broad. After all, they had to support such a strong body and at the same time resist the burden of a huge force. The only thing that puzzled Roland was that although the 2 demons looked very much like humans, they did not have sex. How do they reproduce? He asked Agatha curiously. Don't demons distinguish between men and women? As far as I know, they don't have sex. The latter shook her head. The reproduction of demons has always been an unsolved mystery. After all, it's difficult for us to get close to the Red Mist Tower. Some people think that demons are born in the tower and are condensed from the mist. However, the Quest Society does not agree with this theory, because many people have noticed the phenomenon of demons' promotion in the hundreds of years of fighting against the demons. Promotion? Ashes frowned and asked, what's that? Some demons that were seriously injured by witches appeared on the battlefield again. Their forms had already changed, but from the wounds left behind, we can see that they are still the same demon. This may mean that the senior demons are not born, but they achieve breakthroughs in battles. Once they complete the promotion, even their forms will change, Agatha explained. Well, the magic stone technology is already worrying enough, but the demons also have the ability to upgrade. No wonder they could defeat the humans in the 2 battles of Divine Will. Roland squatted down and looked through the clothes and belongings. Fortunately, These things did not exceed the average level of the current era, and even, were a little behind. The clothes were a mixture of animal skin and woven cloth, as ugly as the work of primitive people. The ferocious-looking masks were actually the skulls of hybrid demonic beasts, and they were all different, which proved that they did not obtain these equipment through manufacturing. Even the transparent mask inlaid on the beast's head was just a polished crystal, and because it had been soaked in the red mist for years, it had become blurred. When placed in front of Roland's eyes, it was completely scarlet. He did not know how the demons could get used to it. Apart from these, there were about a dozen black slates and a few magic stones. Did the Quest Society see these things? Roland spread out the slates and saw a few of them were engraved with twisted red runes, but most of them were empty. These black stones reminded him of the towering building standing in the red mist. The demon's way of recording, Agatha nodded and said, this kind of writing is also recorded with magic power, but we have no way to decipher the content. Maybe their way of thinking is completely different from ours, Tilly said. It's indeed possible, Roland agreed. What about these magic stones? Perception stone, pathfinding stone, and marking stone. Agatha glanced at them a few times. These are things that the scouting demons often use, so they are not rare. Scouting demons. Roland felt a slight headache. So, the demons have now noticed this place and have begun to send troops to investigate the situation in the town. Chapter 400. That's not necessarily true. Agatha shook her head. According to the experience of the Second Battle of Divine Will, if they want to investigate the situation in the human town, they shouldn't act so casually. What do you mean? The prince asked hurriedly. In order to bring back the information, such investigations usually consist of 2 or 3 small teams, most of which are equipped with demonic beast mounts, and they won't be too far away, at least within the range of the mad spear-throwing demons, she said slowly. In order to annihilate these small teams, the Union will often send flying witches to intercept them from behind, and send twice the number of blessed warriors to capture them from the front. At the end of the war, the scale of the investigation team will become larger and larger, and even fearsome demons and flying demons will appear. There's no reason for them to only send 2 ordinary mad demons to investigate until now, and their clothes are really a little shabby. Could it be that the demons think that Border Town doesn't need them to spend a lot of effort to investigate, and that they can just send 2 people at will? Ashes said. This doesn't make sense. Agatha thought for a moment and finally denied it. In the era of the Union, even the smallest town, as long as it was located at the border, would definitely be guarded by witches. It's impossible for the demons to know the changes in the human world in the past 400 years, so the investigation should still be carried out according to the arrangement of the Second Battle of Divine Will. You mean, they didn't deliberately investigate the town, but just happened to run into it? Roland could not help but feel relieved. It's very likely. She frowned, as if thinking about something. I'm afraid the demons don't know that there is a human town here, and they're just investigating the situation around their camp. Their main enemies are demonic beasts, so they don't carry magic stones of concentration, which can't be used continuously, that is, spear throwing. Instead, they choose lightning stones, which are more convenient to attack. Wait. Roland was startled. You mean the Devil's Town? Of course, otherwise how could they come here from thousands of miles away? Agatha said matter-of-factly. Only after establishing a stronghold on the fertile plains can the demons use it as a springboard to go to the barbarian land. Oh, I forgot that it should be called the Four Kingdoms now. Damn, this is a big deal. How can we live in the future if the enemy takes a base in front of our home? The prince widened his eyes and asked, a camp like the one behind the snowy mountains? Almost. In times of war, an outpost will have at least a few mist towers to store the red mist, plus 100 or 200 demons stationed there. Agatha nodded. But considering that the bloody moon has not yet arrived, it is unlikely that they will build a new tower fortress on the fertile plains. The transportation of the red mist is also very inconvenient, so the scale of the camp should not be large. What do you plan to do? Tilly looked at Roland worriedly. First find the camp, if it really exists, he paused, and then, get rid of it. A decisive choice. Ashes raised the corner of her mouth and said, "This is the kind of decision a lord would make." "Don't worry, we will also lend you a hand." If Agatha was right, the demons would not be able to extend their reach to the entire fertile plains before the third battle of Divine will began. Therefore, after removing the stronghold near the western region, they could at least get a few years of peace. Even if the demons wanted to retaliate, they would not be able to. Of course, this was not without risks. At least the demons would know that a group of humans was stationed to the east of the impassable forest and had the ability to actively attack the demons. However, if they allowed the camp to expand, it would only bring more trouble to themselves. After the disappearance of the first batch of scouts, they were likely to send more people, and it was only a matter of time before Border Town was exposed. Moreover, as the stronghold grew larger and larger, the demons would only increase. When the months of demons ended, they would have to deal with the demons that would come to harass them at any time, which would be a bit of a loss. If the first army was pinned down in the town and could not move, how could they complete the planned spring offensive? When Roland returned to his office, he immediately summoned Lightning and Maggie and explained the situation. "Remember, this time, you must not fight with the demons on your own. Return immediately when you find the camp. They may have flying beasts, so your safety is the first priority." "Yes. Cool." He paused for a moment, and then added, "If you can successfully find the target, the dessert for the next week will be ice cream bread." Maggie stretched her neck straight. "Leave it to us, Koo." 3 days later, Roland received Lightning's report. In the barbarian land, about 130 kilometers away from Border Town, they found a place that was suspected to be the Devil's Town. After marking the approximate location on the map, he noticed that it was just in front of the Witch Cooperation Association's route. It was less than 10 kilometers away from the place where the Witch Cooperation Association had encountered the demons. "Why is it suspected?" he asked Lightning. "Did you see the Black Stone Tower?" The little girl shook her head, with a strange look on her face. "I only saw a piece of wreckage." "What?" "Black stone fragments, broken fences, and a huge hole." She rubbed her forehead. "It's the same as the scene I saw when I found the ruins of Sister Agatha. I didn't continue to follow it, I just circled around the wreckage of the camp twice and then came back." "Another hole?" Roland was stunned. Could it be that there was also a giant reptile in this hole? If the last time it was the reptile that swallowed the stone tower, then this time, it also took away the Devil's Town? Between these two matters, did he miss out on some important information? He shook his head, temporarily suppressing the doubts floating in his mind. "Apart from that, did you find anything else?" "No, the whole camp was empty, not a single demon could be seen. I also didn't find any sparkling magic stones, Koo," Maggie added. "I know." Roland thought for a moment and quickly made arrangements. He looked at the white-haired little girl. "You first take Nightingale and Soroya to this place, and then take Nightingale and Sylvie to see if there is anything missing." "Why not just let Soroya and Sylvie go directly?" Lightning asked. "In case of encountering a flying demon, Maggie won't be able to get rid of it." Roland simply explained, "In this case, Nightingale can use the mist to cover the witches to escape from the demon's pursuit, and you can directly speed up in the air and leave." Soroya's photo was quickly placed in front of Roland. Just as Lightning said, there was a big hole about 5 or 6 meters in diameter in the center of the collapsed fence, and the surrounding snow and mud were mixed together, as if something had stirred it up. Broken black stones were scattered on the side, most of them crushed into the soil. No doubt that only a huge creature could cause such damage. Sylvie's discovery made him feel even more uneasy. The underground passage led to the snow-capped mountain range, which was exactly the same direction as the hole that appeared in the ruins of the misty forest. They all pointed to the same place. Chapter 401. In the underground palace of King's City of Greycastle. Timothy sat on the throne with his right hand supporting his cheek. He looked impatiently at the candidates who were performing their assassination skills in the hall. How many idiots have there been since the beginning of winter? I'm probably too lenient, so these clowns are coming at me one after another. He yawned and felt his eyes go dry. Since the Hall of the Sky Dome was destroyed by the snow powder, he had moved the court to the underground palace. After some remodeling, several storage rooms were connected, and the space was large enough to accommodate the ministers and nobles attending the meeting. Most importantly, this place was absolutely safe. There was only one entrance and exit, and above it was the magnificent palace. No amount of snow powder could affect this place. The only downside was that there was no light underground, and all the light was provided by rosin torches. The torches around the walls made the air in the room extremely dry and stuffy, and the sweet smell of rosin made him sleepy. Timothy gnashed his teeth at the thought of his fourth brother. If not for the witnesses who noticed that the attack came from the sky, he would probably still be building watchtowers. Since he knew that this method could not be defended, he could only hold the meeting here for the time being. Roland Wimbledon will pay for this. Your Majesty, the voice of the candidate pulled his thoughts back to the hall. Look, as long as the rebel King Roland dares to appear before me, I can complete the mission you entrusted to me. Timothy glanced in front of the candidate and saw 4 throwing knives accurately inserted into a wooden barrel 20 steps away from him. This is your so-called assassination skill. Yes, Your Majesty, he said confidently. To tell you the truth, I used to do this, and I've killed more than 10 rats. If I attack in the crowd, most of the targets won't even know where the throwing knives came from. What's the reward? Timothy asked as he moved his somewhat stiff body. Just 25 golden dragon, the candidate said while counting on his fingers. 5 for travel expenses and for dressing up. It's easier to get close to the rebel king if you dress up inconspicuously. Sir Wymer, the king gestured. Yes, Your Majesty. Steelheart Knight unsheathed his sword, removed his shield from his back, and walked into the hall. What do you mean? He was startled. Defeat my knight and I will give you the reward. Timothy winked at Sir. The latter nodded, pulled down his armor, and walked towards him. Wait. No, Your Majesty, this won't do. The candidate rolled over awkwardly to avoid the knight's slash and stammered, I can't face it head-on. The knight followed up with a vicious kick to his abdomen, causing him to swallow the rest of his words. After rolling twice on the ground, the responder weakly threw out a throwing knife, but it was easily blocked by the shield. Then, Sir stepped on his hand and swung his sword down. Half of his arm was immediately separated from his body, and the blood that splashed out formed an arc on the ground. My hand. The responder screamed and curled up into a ball, hugging his arm. First, the royal family is not a mouse. Even my stupid brother won't easily get close to a crowd. Second, if you can't even deal with a knight, how are you going to assassinate the lord who has multiple knight guards? I'm afraid that once you get 25 golden dragons, you will never come back here again. Timothy waved his hand. Throw him out. If it had been a month or 2 ago, he would not have treated this group of ignorant and greedy people this way. At most, he would have driven them out of King's City and ordered them not to come back until they got Roland's head. He had given a certain amount of financial support to those who had a slight chance of success, but so far, Roland was still alive and well. It was probably because of this benevolent attitude that more and more people came to him claiming that they could solve the rebellion, and their methods were getting more and more ridiculous. There was even a guy who used a maid in a tavern as an assassin, claiming that the maid was so skilled that no man could refuse her service. Simply ridiculous. Don't they know the difference between ordinary women and witches? The notice had repeatedly publicized his fourth brother's depravity. How could the Lord, who could raise witches, take a fancy to such inferior goods? Timothy heaved a long sigh of relief. Teaching these arrogant applicants a lesson should also make the others restrain themselves a little. Perhaps recruiting people to put down the rebellion itself was a mistake. The only things that could defeat Roland were pills and snow powder. He glanced around the hall, and after seeing that there were no outsiders, he asked the Prime Minister, "How is the progress of the snow powder weapon development?" According to the information collected from Longsong Stronghold, the reason why the miners of Border Town were able to defeat the Duke's Knight Regiment and the frenzied militia was because they used a strange snow powder weapon. It should be a semi-closed iron tube that used the impact of the explosion of the snow powder to propel a lead ball to attack the target, similar to a crossbow arrow. Timothy was very concerned about this, and immediately summoned the experienced blacksmiths in King's City to start copying this new weapon. "It's not ideal, Your Majesty," Marquis Wyke shook his head. "According to the information, the blacksmiths have tried to make a dozen of such weapons, but the power is far less powerful than the rumors. Only a few of them can penetrate the knight's breastplate within 10 steps, and it's difficult to hit the target beyond 50 steps. 10 steps? Timothy frowned. Isn't that the same as sticking to the knight's face? With this, can they still stop the charge of the knight regiment? Indeed, there may be some tricks that we haven't mastered. In addition, even if we gather all the blacksmiths and apprentices in the city, we can only produce 20 iron tubes a month at most, and we may not be able to guarantee that all of them can be used." The Marquis sighed. "So far, for iron tubes have exploded during training, and the guards are also somewhat reluctant to practice this snow powder weapon. Damn it, Border Town is many times more barren than King's City, but Roland has managed to gather hundreds of iron tubes in one winter. He must have gotten help from the demons." Timothy changed the subject angrily. "What about the pills? Hasn't the church given an answer yet?" "Yes, Your Majesty," the Marquis replied. "The High Priest said that the Holy City is fighting against the invasion of demonic beasts, and temporarily has no energy to provide more berserk drugs. He hopes that we can wait patiently until the end of the months of demons before discussing further. I don't want to see the traitors still safely staying in the castle in the western region, not even for one more day. It seems that I have to write a letter to the Holy City of Hermes," Timothy thought bitterly. "If I want to recruit more believers in Grey Castle in the future, I'll have to give you pills in exchange." When he was about to announce the end of today's court meeting, the foreign minister, Sir Brint, suddenly stepped forward and said, "Your Majesty, the envoy from the Kingdom of Dawn has arrived in King's City today, and he hopes to receive you." Chapter 402. According to past practice, envoys from other kingdoms were usually received in the Hall of Sky Dome, but the rubble from the collapsed ceiling had just been cleaned, and it was still a long way from being repaired. Thinking of this, Timothy's hatred towards Roland increased by a fraction. "Take them to my study." He pondered for a moment and finally decided to receive them in the palace. It would be rude to bring the envoys to the basement. As for the purpose of their visit, it was most likely to be to seek help, either in terms of food or cold-resistant materials. There was a saying among the nobles that they contacted friends in the summer and enemies in the winter. This saying was also true between kingdoms. Timothy secretly shook his head. He still had many things to do, so it was better to send the envoys away as soon as possible. When he returned to the study, the two members of the envoy delegation had been waiting for a long time accompanied by Sir Brint. When they saw His Majesty, they stood up and bowed. "Respected King of Grey Castle, Wimbledon 4, the King of the Kingdom of Dawn sends his regards to you." "Greetings to him too." Timothy nodded casually. "Have a seat." He noticed that the man and the woman were both very young and looked quite similar. The family emblem on their chests was an antler scepter. If he remembered correctly, they should be from the famous Luo Shi family in the Kingdom of Dawn. But what on earth was King of Dawn Mizala for thinking? How could he send such a young man as a begging negotiator? Timothy was a little surprised. Most nobles at this age were proud and arrogant. Compared to the old guys who shamelessly cried poverty at the negotiating table for help, they were really too different. "You're both members of the giant deer family, right?" Timothy pointed to his chest. "I've met Duke Luo Shi once." "Indeed, Your Majesty." The young man smiled. "My name is Otto Luo Shi, and this is my sister, Belinda Luo Shi. Their brother and sister. He raised his eyebrows. In that case, there was no need for him to beat around the bush with them. Now is the time when the months of demons are raging. May I know why the King of Dawn sent you here? Timothy was the first to speak. If you are in urgent need of food, cotton, or linen, I can only move some from my own palace to show my sincerity. You should know that the royal decree for the selection of the crown prince has turned the kingdom into a mess. Many places have fallen into a state of paralysis. Just the relief of the refugees has depleted the capital's food reserves. It's very difficult to take out more supplies. I deeply regret this matter, Otto said with a hand on his chest, but Ms. Olafor did not send us here to plead for help, but to deal with a greater threat. Timothy was slightly startled by his words. What threat? The church, Your Majesty, Belinda continued. Now the army of the church has occupied the kingdom of Everwinter and the kingdom of Wolfheart, and a large number of fugitives have poured into the kingdom of Dawn. According to the news they brought, the church is extremely vicious and has seriously violated the rules of war among the nobles. They will hang or exile those who resist. Only the nobles who completely submit to them can survive. This method is completely intended to eliminate the nobles and completely bring the territories under the control of the church. Otto's tone was rather heavy. Ms. Olafor believes that the kingdom of Wolfheart won't be their final target. The kingdom of Dawn and Greycastle are now in a precarious situation. In the coming year, the church is likely to launch a new war and bring the flames of war to our land. The King of Dawn hopes that the two countries can unite and fight against the church. Are you sure that the kingdom of Wolfheart has fallen? Timothy could not help but frown after listening to the other side's statement. Absolutely, Your Majesty. The two nodded. Timothy had heard a little about the invasion of the church, but he did not expect that the church would be able to conquer two kingdoms in such a short period of time. If they were not lying, then the power displayed by the church was a little too terrifying. Of course, he had to confirm this with the Minister of Intelligence. The early arrival of the snow in the months of demons had hindered the caravan's journey, and he had not received any news from the kingdom of Wolfheart for a long time. After a long silence, Timothy asked, "What's the specific plan?" Otto licked his lips, took out a roll of map from his bosom, and spread it in front of Timothy. If the church sets off from the holy city and attacks the kingdom of Dawn or Greycastle, then the other country will lead its army north and attack the holy city of Hermes. This will curb the church's offensive and make it impossible for the two countries to attack each other. An offensive and defensive agreement? Yes, Your Majesty, the messenger replied. Regardless of whether they set off from Coldwind Ridge in Greycastle or from Northshire in the Kingdom of Dawn, they can reach the holy city of Hermes within a week. As long as the main forces are stationed in these two cities, the church may retreat. If this war can be avoided, it will be a blessing for both countries. In this way, he would not be able to buy the pills from the church. Timothy thought to himself, without the pills, how can I drive Roland Wimbledon out of the western region? However, the church was also a target that he had to be wary of. It was best to buy enough pills and unify the whole territory of Greycastle before reaching an agreement with the Kingdom of Dawn. This is a matter of great importance. I need to discuss it with the ministers before I can make a decision. You can stay in the palace for the time being and wait for news. Chapter 403. The Fjords, Sleeping Island. Novels, Chinese, novels. When the last house rose, the skyline had turned into a dusky yellow. Although the setting sun could not be seen, the afterglow that penetrated through the clouds still left a golden ripple on the surface of the sea. If it were not for the gusts of cold wind blowing in their faces, such a scene would not have looked much different from that of autumn. Well, it's done. Lotus lifted the scarf around her neck so that her ears could be wrapped in soft cotton hair. Next, we just need to move the furniture and bed in, and then we can move in. A masterpiece. Durat Goldbeard clapped his hands and said, "It only took half a month to build so many houses. I thought Lady Tilly was just exaggerating at first. Lady Tilly never lies. Breeze interrupted. Yes, yes. He touched his thick chin and said, in this way, I can move my people here without worry. Huh? What's this? The merchant from Crescent Moon Bay curiously touched the low wall of the house with a raised groove. He even bent down and poked his head inside to look around. This is a heating device I learned in the western region. It's called a fire pit, Lotus explained. It's connected to the kitchen. As long as there's a fire there, the pit will also become very warm. When the time comes, we can lay a layer of wood on top of it, then cover it with linen or straw. Whether it's a bench or a bed, it's much more comfortable than ordinary furniture, especially in winter. Interesting design. Durat looked at Lotus. If I hire you for a long time, how many golden dragons do I need? What do you mean? Lotus was slightly startled. Go to Crescent Moon Bay to work. There are still a few undeveloped areas in my territory. With your ability, you'll be an excellent helper. He rubbed his hands and said, how many golden dragons do I need to pay the sleeping spell for Lady Tilly to agree to let you follow me? No, I don't want to leave. There, you can live better than this, interrupted Durat. You can live in the same courtyard with me, and enjoy wine and game from the 4 kingdoms every day, and be accompanied wherever you go by a squire, which is a life many men long for. If you serve me, all this will not be a problem. Besides, didn't Lady Tilly say that the sleeping spell will grant all requests? No matter how high the recruitment fee is, I can still afford it. Lotus wrinkled her brows. She wasn't unfamiliar with this kind of attitude. He kept saying that he was hiring her, but in fact, it wasn't much different from buying her. Just when she was about to yell at them, Breeze gently held her hand. Being able to fulfill your request doesn't mean that you'll definitely agree to it. There are some things that even a witch can't do. Another point of the contract is that the parties must agree to it. Are you saying that I can't pay you back? I've never seen anyone do business like this, Durat said unhappily. Don't tell me that the words you said when you activated the sleeping spell were just to tease us. Sooner or later, no one will care about us. That's not necessarily true, someone behind him suddenly chimed in. Whether it's the fjords or the 4 kingdoms, there's only one bounty guild formed by witches. If you don't patronize us, others will naturally come. You again. The merchant turned his head and couldn't help but be startled. Thunder, Lord Thunder. When the sleeping spell was drawing up the rules, I came up with an idea. Signing the contract requires the consent of the employees, considering the possible risks in the task. We can't force them to go through a mountain of blades and a sea of flames, Thunder said with a clear laugh. Do you think there's a problem? No, it's very reasonable. Durat's expression quickly returned to normal. Then. I'll have to trouble you in the future, Miss Lotus. Phew, Lotus looked at the back of the merchant and his party and breathed a sigh of relief. Thank you. It's okay, I just happened to pass by. Thunder smiled. Didn't you go to the western region with Lady Tilly? Yes, but I came back with Honey and Breeze because Sleeping Island needs to prepare supplies and houses for the winter. She briefly explained what had happened. Have you completed your adventure? Ha ha ha, yes, it was really an incredible journey. When it came to the adventure, Thunder's eyes lit up. It was the first time I saw a sea of completely different heights. The ship almost seemed to be flying, sailing vertically toward the precipice formed by the waves, but we didn't fall into the deep sea. If I hadn't seen it with my own eyes, I would never have believed that such a strange scene existed in the world. Sea of different heights? Lotus murmured. What kind of scene is that? The sea isn't a stone, can't it flow down? Well, I named it the Sealine, which is northeast of the Shadow Islands. After climbing over it, the precipice is like a long line with no end in sight, dividing the sea into 2 distinct sections. He excitedly patted his chest. I can't wait to try the next farther voyage. He's worthy of being the most outstanding explorer in the fjords. The first thing he talks about when he comes back is adventure, and not his daughter in the western region. Lotus looked at his endless talk and shook her head helplessly. When night fell, the temperature outside plummeted. Lotus climbed into bed early, which was also the most relaxing moment of the day. Over the past month, in addition to building a new batch of houses, she had also remodeled the other witches' old houses. She would huddle with the others on the warm Kong bed, chatting about what she had seen and heard in Border Town, and answering her companions' sometimes curious and sometimes envious questions. She could casually talk for most of the night. This time, she talked about the bird beak mushroom. When he talked about rolling it in a little bit of butter a few times, frying it until both sides were golden brown, and sprinkling some salt on it to make an extremely delicious dish, the sound of people swallowing their saliva could be heard in unison. "Ah! I also want to eat this," Shadow shouted. "After chewing dried fish on the ship for a month, my mouth is full of salt." "That's great." Molly couldn't help but pinch Lotus. "If only Lady Tilly's brother had invited me." "Hey, what's more amazing is that you haven't heard," someone laughed. "The water comes directly from the wall when bathing there, and there's also a fragrant soap that emits a fragrance after bathing." "There's really such a thing?" Shadow asked curiously. "Of course, I also brought one back," Lotus curled her lips. "But it's already been used up." "Don't talk about that, at least they've experienced it. I followed Lady Tilly to the western region, and then immediately brought them back, so I didn't enjoy anything," Breeze complained. Listening to the witch's lively discussion, Lotus suddenly couldn't help but have an idea pop up in her mind. If the person who wanted to hire her for a long time was His Highness Roland Wimbledon, instead of Durat Goldbeard, would she agree? After thinking about it, she realized that if the other party was Roland, she wouldn't be able to say a word of refusal. It would be too shameful. Lotus shrank back into the quilt and looked around. Fortunately, the oil lamp had been blown out, so no one would discover her thoughts. But when would Lady Tilly accept His Highness Roland? If only they could always be together. Lotus tightened the scarf in her arms. In this way, whether it was herself or the other witches, they could all live happily in Border Town. Chapter 404. A genius in a second to remember if you want to go. On the internet, we provide you with wonderful novels to read. At the beginning of the second month of winter, Barav walked into Roland's office with a stack of books under his arm. As soon as he walked to the table, his eyes were attracted by a huge colorful picture on the table. "Is this a map of the entire western region?" "Not only the western region," Roland said with a smile. "It also includes a part of the barbarian land and the misty forest, especially this open space." He pointed to the area north of the impassable mountain range, which was the fertile plains mentioned by Agatha. At present, the explored area is nearly the size of 3 western regions. If we can reclaim it, it can support hundreds of thousands of people. In order to completely eliminate the threat of Devil's Town, he asked Lightning and Maggie to scan the area and draw a map. Since Maggie could now carry Soroya to do the drawing, the map was more accurate. Although the mystery of the disappearance of Devil's Town remained unsolved, the good news was that there were no signs of a second enemy camp within 200 kilometers of Border Town. But there are not only demonic beasts in the barbarian land, but also the terrible enemies you mentioned. Barav hesitated. "Isn't it too dangerous to reclaim the land in the northwest? By that time, the First Army should also have the power to fight against the demons." Roland slowly moved his finger on the plain. "If we can't defeat these enemies, it doesn't matter where we build our territory." Since the appearance of demon scouts in the misty forest, he realized that it was no longer suitable to hide the news. In order to avoid panic caused by sudden exposure, the prince revealed the existence of the demons to a few high-level officials. As far as the current situation was concerned, the reaction of the people was quite normal. Of course, he also slightly suppressed the strength of the demons, claimed that these enemies were basically equivalent to demonic hybrids, and did not reveal the history of the previous 2 battles of divine will. Roland knew that he could not stay at the border of the continent forever. Compared to the Four Kingdoms, the barbarian land, or the fertile plains, was a place worth managing. The explored area was only a corner of the entire plain. It was not hard to imagine how vast the territory occupied by human beings was during the Second Battle of Divine Will. He retracted his finger, rolled up the map, and put it aside. "Do you have anything to report?" "Yes, Your Highness." Barav nodded and spread the book under his arm in front of the prince. "I have already drawn up a plan to expand the city hall according to your request." "Oh. Let me see." In order to cope with the rapid growth of the territory after the construction of the city, Roland formulated a new framework for the future management organization according to the classification of the functional departments of the later government. Generally speaking, the entire upper echelons were divided into four parts: City Hall, the Army, the Security Bureau, and the Witch Union. According to the expansion plan, the new City Hall would assume the role of the Cabinet or the State Council, and would also be the core organization of the entire territory. At that time, the number of employees would be increased to about 500, with 6 departments: finance, foreign affairs, education, agriculture, industry, and justice. New departments could be added at any time according to the needs. In addition, after Grey Castle was unified, other cities could follow suit and set up corresponding subordinate organizations, which would be managed by City Hall. In addition to combat personnel, the army also had independent production departments and medical departments as logistical support. Each army would have a commander-in-chief, who was responsible for specific combat matters, and the highest authority of the army belonged to the commander-in-chief. The Security Bureau was a secret organization hidden in the dark. Its funds were not allocated by City Hall, and its members were not recorded in the files. Its main function was to monitor the territory's internal security and official corruption. Finally, there was the Witch Union. Roland thought about this organization for a long time, and finally decided to count it as an independent department, rather than separate it and integrate the witches into other departments. The reason was that some witches' abilities were so different before and after the evolution that they could work in multiple departments. For example, Anna and Soroya, from industry to agriculture, and then to national defense and education, they could play an important role. Another point was that some witches did not have a job for the time being, but it did not mean that it would be the same in the future. Grouping them together could effectively avoid dampening their enthusiasm. This was also what Scroll and Vendi had mentioned to him. He hoped that in the future, the Witch Union would be able to operate on its own, including accepting witches, checking their abilities, and assigning jobs. "Can you recruit so many literate people?" Roland looked up and asked after he finished reading the City Hall director's proposal. An organization of 500 people was definitely considered huge in this era, and it required everyone to be able to read documents, which was almost impossible to achieve in other territories. It might be possible to find so many literate people in the king's city, but the proud nobles would certainly not be willing to serve as an apprentice. With the addition of the new batch of graduates, there should be no problem, Barav replied. Now from the feedback of the recruitment announcement, the position in City Hall is the most popular. It seems that the popularity of being a civil servant is the same in any world. Roland could not help but raise the corner of his mouth. In that case, let's recruit people according to the proposal. The next task is to formulate the laws. As long as you give me the main provisions you mentioned last time, I'll gather the apprentices to complete the rest as soon as possible, the City Hall director said in high spirits. That's called the basic law, Roland smiled. It seemed that the witches were not the only model workers who were interested in their work. For a new regime, this was a good sign. By the way, Your Highness, Barav said, if we expand the size of the City Hall according to the plan, the current house may not be able to accommodate so many people. Can we build a new City Hall? The prince nodded. Of course, I'll arrange for Car to carry it out. In the eyes of the subjects, this was equivalent to the face of the Lord. They rarely had the opportunity to step into the castle, but often went to the City Hall to handle affairs, so a certain degree of luxury and style was still necessary. If it was too simple and close to the people, it would instead reduce the trust of the people. After waiting for Barav to leave, Roland asked his guards to summon Prestiza, the knight of the elk family. Roland had not seen him for more than half a year, and he had obviously gained weight. His cheeks were glowing red, and it seemed that he was living a good life. Recently, there have been a lot of eggs and poultry in the convenience market, and it's all thanks to you, Roland said with a smile. It seems that you're really good at raising chickens and ducks. Ha! He smiled a little embarrassedly. Without your initial support, I wouldn't have been able to do this. The path of breeding was not always smooth sailing. In the beginning, there was a foul plague, which caused a large number of chickens to die. With the idea of paying his tuition, Roland did not throw him into the mine, but continued to buy chicken seedlings from the stronghold and let him raise them. Now, Prius could be regarded as one of the irreplaceable talents in Border Town. I plan to let you work in the city hall under the Ministry of Agriculture. Are you willing? Your Highness, you don't want me to continue feeding chickens and ducks? Prius was slightly startled. Of course not. You've done a good job, so I hope you can bring more people to invest in this industry, Roland encouraged him. Next, I plan to expand the scale of breeding by dozens of times. You and your family won't be able to take care of everything. After you join the city hall, you can pass on your experience to more people and guide them on how to raise chickens. With Lily's ability to kill bacteria and get rid of diseases, the thorniest problem in animal husbandry no longer existed. Not only chickens and ducks, but also the breeding of large livestock such as cattle and sheep was obviously part of the prince's expansion plan. This is undoubtedly a great job, no less than the honor brought by the identity of a knight. The prince paused and then said, "One day, eggs and poultry will be served on the dining table of every household in the western region, and when they see these delicious foods, they will firmly remember your name. What do you think?" "I am willing to serve you." Prius excitedly clenched his fist in front of his chest and bowed in response. Chapter 405. Genius 1 Second to Remember Love. Go. TalkNet, providing you with wonderful novels to read. Nana got up from the bed and yawned loudly. She glanced at the white sky outside the window, but it was still the same snowy scene. The little girl reluctantly moved out of the warm quilt, put on a thick winter coat, and slowly walked out of the bedroom, only to see Aunt Ada cleaning the living room. "Good morning," she said vaguely. "Ah, little princess, you're up." Ada smiled at her. "Do you want breakfast?" "It's already heated up." "Yes." Nana sat at the table, glanced around the room, but did not find her father. "Where's my father?" "Lord Pine went out early in the morning," Ada's voice came from the kitchen. "He carried his silver shotgun." Sure enough, she curled her lips. "He probably went to the city wall to practice shooting." Ever since he fought against demonic beasts with a gun, he had been fascinated by this kind of explosive weapon. Every day, he wiped the barrel of the gun, and whenever he had time, he would go to the city wall. He even used his medical ability as a bargaining chip to get a special gun from His Highness Roland. It's all because His Highness said that a long-barreled shotgun is the standard equipment for hunters. Nana thought, if my mother was still here, he would not go out all day. "Breakfast is here," Ada put 2 steaming plates in front of Nana. "Fried eggs and white bread, eat it while it's hot." "Thank you." Breakfast should have been prepared before her father went out. In order to prevent it from getting cold, she put it in hot water to keep it warm. Only the careful Aunt Ada would do this. If he let his father take care of him, he would definitely be eating frozen eggs. Love go little say Netka Nana could not help but sigh. It would be great if she could marry her father. But the little girl also knew that this hope was unlikely to come true. Ada was a family servant, but her father was now a noble in Border Town. According to her knowledge, it was difficult for nobles and ordinary people to get together. After finishing the bread and eggs, Nana wiped her mouth and shouted, "I'm going to the hospital." "Okay." Ada put down the broom in her hand and sent her to the door. She squatted down and tied the scarf for her. Be careful on the road, Miss Pine. N. Nana went out of the door, welcoming the snow. This was her daily routine. She would leave home in the morning and go to the hospital. If there were any injured, she would help them. If not, she would use animals to practice her abilities. At noon, she returned to the castle to have lunch with His Highness Roland. In the afternoon, she continued to stay in the medical center until the evening when she returned to her residence. She was the only witch who did not live in the castle. Although waiting in the medical center was a little boring, she persevered in order to let the injured get treatment as soon as possible. Another thing that supported her was the smiles and enthusiasm of the townspeople. Lady Nana, good morning. Miss Angel, did you go to the hospital again? The weather is not good today. Pay attention to your health. Have you had your breakfast, Miss Pine? I just cooked some hot oatmeal, come and have a bowl. Walking on the road, such greetings came one after another. Compared to the situation a year ago, it was a completely different situation. Her sisters all said that she was now the most popular witch in Border Town, even Anna couldn't be compared to her. Nana did not care who was more popular. She simply liked the current atmosphere. Every townspeople who had been treated by her would greet her warmly, which filled her heart with a sense of achievement. Sister Anna was right, Nana thought. Only by being strong enough to face prejudice can I change. When she arrived at the medical center, a soldier of the First Army who was guarding the door saluted her respectfully. Hello, Miss Nana. Good morning. Have any injured people been sent here? Not at the moment, the soldier replied. But your friend has come. Friend? She was slightly startled. Has Anna come to see me? Thinking of this, Nana ran up to the second floor. When she opened the door, she saw Mystery Moon, Hummingbird, and Lily lying by the table, bored to death. When they saw her, they immediately got up and surrounded her. Are you pleasantly surprised? We specially came to play with you. Mystery Moon raised her hand and shouted. Because Mystery Moon said that since we have nothing to do in the castle, we might as well come out for a walk, Hummingbird added. You're very free, yes, but I'm not idle at all. There are so many small insect samples to observe, Lily, who was walking at the back, complained. And Miss Nana should be very busy. Do you think she's like you? Really? Yesterday I saw you dozing off in front of the microscope. It was obvious that you were very impatient, Mystery Moon shrugged. No. It turned out that it was not Anna. Nana was slightly disappointed, but she quickly recovered. Sister Anna was now the busiest person by His Highness' side. Naturally, it was impossible for her to accompany her as often as before. This could not be helped. No, I'm also very idle, she smiled. Thank you. Ahem, since you said so, I'll stay with you. Lily tilted her head. It's no big deal to leave the insects for tomorrow's observation. What are we going to play? Hummingbird asked. Do you still need to ask? Mystery Moon took out a deck of cards. Of course it's this. Hey, landlord is very interesting, but only 3 people can play. No, it's not fighting the landlord. She shook her head mysteriously. It's a new game. 4 people can play together to see who can play faster. I just learned it from Andrea yesterday. The Sleeping Island Poker Trio? Lily put her hand on her forehead. Of all the people you could learn from, you learned from them. If you used your energy to learn new knowledge from His Highness, you wouldn't have made no progress until now. These are also from His Highness Roland, Mystery Moon protested. How is it not learning new knowledge from His Highness? Except for you, no one else in the Witch Union will think so. Lily glared at her. I also want to learn. Hummingbird muttered in a low voice. Nana looked at all of this and couldn't help but laugh out loud. It was as if she had returned to Teacher Carl's academy, living a carefree life. Count me in, since it's 3 against 1, it's decided, quickly deal the cards. Accompanied by the three witches, the boring morning passed in the blink of an eye. After returning to the castle for lunch, Nana returned to the medical center alone. As soon as she entered the hall, she saw an unexpected person. Carr Van Bate. Mr. Carr. Nana said in surprise. Why are you here? To see you. Carr smiled and looked her up and down. He said with relief, You've grown up. Really? Nana lowered her head with some embarrassment. But compared to Sister Anna, I'm still far behind. Everyone is different. You also have your strengths. He laughed. After witnessing your and Anna's growth, as well as the changes in the whole town, I can no longer see any cracks. Cracks? Nana was stunned. Nothing, you can think of it as nonsense. Carr shook his head. I used to think that God had abandoned this world, but now it seems that he is still watching us. Not God, Nana corrected him. His Highness said that this is the result of people's own efforts. Weren't those residential areas built by you? But without a source, all of this would not have happened. At that time, I thought that Anna had died and you had awakened as a witch. I was panicking and didn't know what to do. Maybe some god heard my prayers and responded to my call. Carr said softly. He brought us His Highness Roland. Chapter 406. Genius 1 second. Remember, if you want to go. The internet provides you with wonderful novels to read. Ah. I envy Nana. Mystery Moon wiped her wet hair and put her face in front of Lily, who was sitting at the desk. Oh, the latter replied without turning her head. Aren't you going to ask me why I envy her? You're going to say it soon anyway. Lily curled her lips. Damn it. Mystery Moon muttered, but finally couldn't help but say, didn't you see how the soldiers guarding the hospital and the nearby townspeople treated her? I saw it. Hello, Lady Nana, Miss Angel, are you leaving? Miss Pine, this is the wheat cake I made myself. I also want to be treated like this. Mystery Moon put her face on Lily's cheek, but was then ruthlessly pushed away. That was exchanged with her ability, Lily said calmly. Didn't you notice that after the arrival of the months of the demons, she stayed in the hospital almost every day, waiting to treat the wounded? Half of the town's original residents have received her help, and the rest are basically the families of the recipients. You're exaggerating. No, Lily sighed and put down the book in her hand. Although not everyone will go up to the city wall to fight against the demonic beasts, getting injured is a normal thing for the town's residents. Miners will get their toes smashed by ore, kiln workers will get scalded, and even more so for the apprentices in the steam engine factory and chemical laboratory. She paused. His Highness once told me that Nana and I are the cornerstones of Border Town's medical care. One of us is in charge of internal affairs, while the other is in charge of external affairs, so that everyone can still maintain high-intensity work in the absence of a safety system. But in fact, except for epidemic prevention for the new refugees, I have done nothing else. So you also envy her, just like me. Mystery Moon unyieldingly came closer. I don't. She said loudly, and stay away from me, you're disturbing my reading. Oh. Mystery Moon shrank her head. But I really envy her. Then learn from Nana, take the initiative to help every townspeople until they know you and are familiar with you. Naturally, people will say hello to you wherever you go. Lily shrugged. But I don't have her ability, Mystery Moon said dejectedly. If you don't have the ability, then you have to rely on your physical strength, Lily sneered. Anyway, in the Witch Cooperation Association camp, you also did the same. You, despicable. When she went back to bed, Mystery Moon was still upset. Although she knew what Roland had said was right, she still felt that she was inferior in the Witch Union. But she didn't want to continue like this. She had finally found an ideal place to settle down, and doing nothing all day made her feel uneasy. After a sleepless night, the next day, Mystery Moon knocked on the door of Roland's office with dark circles under her eyes. What's wrong? The prince asked in surprise. Were you bullied? By Lily? No, it's nothing. She leaned over to Roland's table. Your Royal Highness, didn't you say that I have great potential? Why haven't my abilities changed? Can't I evolve if I don't understand natural science theoretical basis? So that's how it is. The other party couldn't help but laugh out loud. Actually, I've been thinking about this too. What's the problem? Didn't Agatha say that more than 400 years ago, even though the Union witches lacked a systematic understanding of the world, they could still awaken to a higher level? In addition to continuous practice as a foundation, the rest was an epiphany. This could be triggered by observing real phenomena, or it could be an accidental inspiration. Roland said, but the awakening caused by this is obviously not as good as the understanding and evolution after systematic learning. Agatha's magic power is the proof. Not only is she the lowest among the evolved witches, but she's even worse than some ordinary witches, such as Sylvie and Andrea. It doesn't matter, as long as I can evolve. Mystery Moon's eyes lit up. Have you thought of a way? It's not guaranteed to succeed. The prince spread out his hands and said, just take it as a try. What do you think of magnetic force? A force produced by a magnetic field on a magnet and an electric current. The directional movement of electrons produces magnetic force. This is the original words in the book. He laughed. You've memorized it quite well, but I guess you don't understand the content at all. After a moment of hesitation, Mystery Moon nodded. You've seen the use of iron powder to simulate magnetic lines of force, and you know the direction of magnetic force. You've also seen a direct current generator. So I think, you may not be able to quickly cut magnetic lines in a closed circuit, but you can change the magnetic field you form, and then you can personally experience the change from magnetism to electricity. I don't quite understand. The essence of magnetism to electricity is the change of magnetic flux in a closed circuit. If you want to change the magnetic flux in a constant magnetic field, you can only achieve it by changing the area. In other words, you have to cut the magnetic induction lines. The prince drew a diagram on the paper. What if the area is constant? Then you have to change the magnetic field. If the magnetic field changes, it's equivalent to the magnetic flux changes. Mystery Moon opened her mouth, but found that she didn't understand a single word. His Royal Highness laughed. It doesn't matter if you don't understand. You just have to follow the following method: quickly release and restrain your own magnetic force, instead of continuously using your ability. And then? Mystery Moon waited for a while, but found that he didn't continue. That's all. He shook his head. Just this step. Huh. As long as I keep releasing magnetic force. That's right. If possible, it's best to change the direction of the magnetic field lines, for example, from your left hand to your right hand. The prince laughed. You can practice this method first. I'll prepare a little toy for you. When you master this method, you'll naturally understand its meaning. 2 days later, Mystery Moon received the so-called little toy from His Royal Highness. It was a square frame made of copper wire, the top of which was connected to a transparent spherical glass, less than half the size of a fist. If one looked closely, one could see that the copper wire was broken in the sphere, and was connected by a much smaller metal wire. In addition, there was also a manual: hold both ends of the square frame with both hands to practice your ability. Note: remember to close the curtains and hide the stone of light. What kind of game is this? She scratched her head and finally obediently followed the instructions on the manual. Anyway, it was all practice, so she would just pretend that it didn't exist. It wasn't difficult to quickly release and restrain the ability, but changing the direction of the magnetic force was a big headache for Mystery Moon. After all, magnetic force was like a natural part of her. At first, it was as if she had to take turns to breathe through her 2 nostrils. Although she had said goodbye to poker these 2 days and practiced this skill all day, she could only maintain it for a short period of time. She took a deep breath and mobilized the magic in her body. At first, she didn't feel anything different, but soon, Mystery Moon saw a red light. The metal wire in the glass ball turned into a thin orange-red line, and then the light became stronger and stronger. In the blink of an eye, it was so dazzling that Mystery Moon couldn't believe her eyes. The dark room was unexpectedly illuminated by a soft light that she had never seen before, which was far purer than a candle. Until with a soft, pop sound, the red light dissipated and everything returned to darkness, she still hadn't come to her senses. Chapter 407. Genius 1 Second. Remember Love Yo Go? The internet provides you with wonderful novels to read. The next morning, Mystery Moon hurriedly ran into the office, the dark circles under her eyes widening. Why did the glass light up? After that, no matter how I used my ability, it didn't respond. As soon as she opened the door, she couldn't wait to shout. You did it so quickly. His Royal Highness looked a little surprised. He put down the quill and took the small toy from Mystery Moon's hands. I thought it would take you 2 or 3 days. Mystery Moon stood on tiptoe, rested her chin on the edge of the table, and asked while blinking, what is the light? It's an electric light, His Royal Highness laughed. You released thunder from the sky. Thunder. Thunder. She couldn't help but repeat in a low voice, and then shook her head, but it doesn't look like it at all. The light is orange-red, and it continues to shine. Thunder flashes and then disappears. Thunder ignites the filament, so that it continuously emits light. The prince pinched the glass ball and spun it twice, then took it off. It doesn't matter if you don't understand, I will let you see real electricity. Mystery Moon's eyes widened, staring at his every move, for fear of missing something. After he pulled the 2 copper wires closer, he twisted the glass ball back. Well, continue to practice. That's it. She took the wire frame, feeling very disappointed. Yes, the prince covered his mouth. Remember to close the curtains during this practice. When Mystery Moon returned to the bedroom, Lily was sitting on the bed, reading the book, Natural Science Theoretical Foundation. Why did you get up so early today? She said with a look of surprise. Since you're up, help me bring back breakfast. I want fried eggs and bread, not oatmeal. No, I won't bring breakfast for a traitor. Mystery Moon snorted, reached out and closed the thick French curtains. The room suddenly became dark. Hey, what are you going to do? Lily frowned. Practice my ability. She sat on the floor, closed the curtains, put away the glowing stone. This is His Royal Highness' request. Okay, the little girl rolled her eyes. I'll go to the hall to read. You can't. Mystery Moon shouted. Why? Lily glared at her. I can't read now, and I'm hungry. Am I supposed to stay here with you? Ah. Mystery Moon choked. Then I'll bring you breakfast. Can you stay here? Why, said Lily with interest, are you afraid of the dark? Of course not. She puffed up her cheeks and muttered after a while, I just want someone to accompany me. She wanted others to see her progress. She wanted others to be amazed by her ability. If she failed, she also wanted someone to comfort her. However, she would never say these words to Lily. All right, judging from your pitiful tone, I'll reluctantly promise you this once. The latter yawned. Breakfast, hurry up. After running an errand, Mystery Moon was finally ready to practice. What are you going to do? Lily asked while chewing the egg. Are you going to give magnetism to the thing in your hand? No, I want to quickly change the magnetic force in my hands. His Highness said that we can see thunder this way. Lily couldn't help but be stunned. Thunder? Well, I'm starting. Wait, the little girl shouted and moved her body toward the door. Now, you can use your ability. Mystery Moon let out a long breath and operated her magic according to the previous practice. If this scene happened in the camp of the Witch Cooperation Association, her mentor Kara would definitely come and scold her. But in order to make it easier for her to practice, His Highness deliberately replaced all the iron utensils in the bedroom, including the iron nails, with copper products. Because of what she had experienced in Border Town, she was even more unwilling to accept her own inaction. Pictures emerged in her mind one by one, like a horse lantern. This time, she found that she was very quickly in the right state. The magic jumped between her hands, faster and faster, and the intensity was constantly increasing. Then Mystery Moon saw the electric light. Like a blue ghost appearing in the clouds, the light appeared briefly and disappeared in an instant, but at that moment, she clearly saw the trajectory of the electric light. It was like a small arc, jumping from one end of the copper wire to the other, and at the same time, it made a slight crackling sound. But this was far from the end. Then the second one, the third one. She was surprised to find that every time the magnetic force changed, she could see the striking electric light jumping up, and the track also corresponded with it, making the same change. As the direction of the magnetic force quickly changed, a blue and white bridge gradually appeared between the two copper wires. What is this? Lily, who was standing in the distance, could not help but stare. Compared with the orange light yesterday, this electric light was insignificant, but it made Mystery Moon's heart tremble. For the first time, she saw her own ability with her own eyes. Compared with the invisible magnetic force lines, the rhythm and direction of the electric arc were completely under her control. This was indeed the thunder that she had created. Electricity generates magnetism, and magnetism generates electricity. So this is how it works. She felt the power in her body become clear. Mystery Moon stood up, put the metal frame on the table, and slowly loosened her hands. The magic power subsided, but the two ends of the copper wire were still shining, and from a distance, they looked like stars in the night. She now had a deeper understanding of the words. In other words, electricity was magnetism, and magnetism was electricity. Roland bit the quill in his mouth and rubbed his sore neck. Do you need my help? Nightingale's voice came into his ears. Ah, thank you. She gently nodded, and then a pair of white hands put on his shoulders, and the strength was just right. Roland slightly closed his eyes, enjoying this moment of peace. For the town's first law, which was also the basic law that would become the main law in the future, he had woken up even earlier than his personal guards in the past 3 days. He had only finished writing it today. Because he knew nothing about the law, he could only rely on his own understanding of the system to put together a short dozen or so articles in plain words, which added up to less than 2 pages. But it already contained the ideas of the new world. Completely different from the ancient feudal system, he believed that this law, together with his territory, would promote the new system to the whole continent. With it as the foundation, the new kingdom would inevitably radiate a different brilliance. Your Highness. The office door was suddenly pushed open, and Mystery Moon ran in, holding the copper wire frame. I finally understand. Roland opened his eyes and saw that Mystery Moon put the little toy on the desk, and then let go of her hands. Look. She clearly did not touch the wire frame, but the arc of light still existed at the broken copper wire. Looking at this incredible scene, Roland could not help but open his mouth, and the quill slipped from the corner of his mouth and fell to the ground. Chapter 408. What did he see? A system that was independent of external energy supply but still generated electricity on its own. Considering that Mystery Moon's ability was an enchantment type, the answer was obvious. She had given a brand new feature to the metal frame, which was to use magic power as a source of energy. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor, Endless Fantasy Translation, how did you do it? Roland asked in amazement. You said that creating thunder and lightning requires a change in magnetic force, so I tried to attach the changing magnetic force to the copper wire, and the result is like this. Mystery Moon answered carefully, her eyes full of expectation. So that's how it is. The prince thought. Electricity and magnetism are interrelated, but they are inseparable. I can't help but think, since my ability can make objects magnetic, can I also make them generate thunder and lightning? So that's how it is. The prince thought. Electric current can indeed generate a magnetic field, but a magnetic field can't generate electric current unconditionally. The latter must act on a closed coil, and at the same time, there must be a change in the magnetic flux. Whether it is changing the magnetic area or the magnetic force, external energy is needed to achieve it. Mystery Moon's new ability replaced this part, making the magnetic force change automatically without external interference. In the past, Roland would definitely think that this was a perpetual motion model, but now he understood that the witch's ability could not be measured by common sense, and the magnetic force of enchantment did not necessarily come from the magnetic poles, just like black fire was not fire. These were all the effects of magic power. The only thing he was curious about was, has Mystery Moon ever noticed the magnetic force change of enchanted objects before? When Roland asked this question, she nodded at first, but soon shook her head and said, when I was in the Witch Cooperation Association, I also thought of changing the magnetic force of objects at will. When not in use, I can reduce the magnetic force to avoid causing trouble to other sisters. But it seems to be useless, the magnetic force of objects is always maintained at a fixed size. I thought it was impossible, so I didn't try it again. Sure enough, Roland turned to Nightingale and asked, the form of her magic power. It has condensed. Nightingale emerged from the mist and said with a smile, like a surging blue wave. Mystery Moon's voice suddenly became excited. Is it true that I... That's right, your ability has evolved, Roland affirmed. Without a long period of unremitting practice, it's impossible to understand the key to advancement so quickly. You've performed very well. From today onwards, you will be the 6th witch in the Witch Union to gain an evolved ability. Congratulations. Nightingale smiled as she walked over and patted her head. Then can I do more for your highness now? Mystery Moon asked, her eyes sparkling. Yeah, too many to count, Roland said with a smirk. As I said before, your potential is limitless. But, take a good rest first. Your dark eye circles are almost as big as a fist. Let me test your abilities in the afternoon. She nodded vigorously. After Mystery Moon left the office, Nightingale immediately closed the door and came over. Instead of returning to the table or the floor-to-ceiling window as usual, she flashed close to Roland, pressed his shoulders excitedly, and bent down. Her pale blonde hair fell on his cheeks, making him feel slightly itchy. Looking at her watery eyes and soft red lips, Roland's heart suddenly beat several times faster. Huh? What's going on? Does she want to do it here? But it's still daytime. Tell me the method. Nightingale's words stunned the prince. Wait, the story seems to be developing differently from what I thought. What method? You didn't need to understand the theoretical basis of natural science to find a way to evolve, she said excitedly. With Mystery Moon's exam results, it's impossible for her to understand the content of the book, but you still helped her evolve a new ability. What should I do? Do I also need to practice with a small toy? Ugh, so it's about evolution. This request is really regrettable, isn't it? It should be a relief. Roland cleared his throat and collected his thoughts. I'm afraid that it'll be very difficult for you to achieve a breakthrough in your ability through epiphany. Why? According to Agatha, it's possible to trigger evolution by witnessing phenomena related to the ability in reality. Your mist is so incredible that I don't know its specific principles, let alone guide you to understand it, Roland explained. If you want to condense magic power, I'm afraid there's only one way to go, which is to master all the knowledge of nature and physics, and advanced mathematics is also a skill that you must be familiar with. Nightingale's expression immediately collapsed. She walked to the recliner and leaned softly against the back, as if her body had been hollowed out. After lunch, Roland spent half a day to conduct a comprehensive test of Mystery Moon's new ability. He named this ability Indefinite Magnetism. Like the previous magnetic bestowal ability, it could be attached to any object and produce periodic changes according to the magic power injected during the enchantment. But for insulators, there was almost no electric current effect. In addition, her magic power was also the lowest among the evolved witches. She could only light up 2 magic stones on the sigil of God's will, which was half less than Maggie's. Moreover, the enchantment ability had a very high demand on magic power. The greater the upper limit of the change of the magnetic force, the longer the duration, and the more amazing the magic power required. After a series of tests, he found that Mystery Moon's new ability was stable as a battery, but it was far from enough to drive a large motor and reach the power of an existing steam engine. He used the DC motor, which was originally assembled for water electrolysis, to transform it into an electric motor for the test, and the result was quite bad. Mystery Moon consumed all her magic power to enchant the motor rotor, but it could only run for half a day, which almost negated its practical value as a source of power. However, Roland did not disclose this to Mystery Moon. Instead, he encouraged her to continue to practice her new ability and not to fall behind in her studies. For her, evolution was not easy, and any bad news might make her depressed. Fortunately, ability evolution was not a one-time deal. As long as Mystery Moon could make another breakthrough through systematic learning, there was still a chance to make up for the magic power she lacked. In addition, Roland also thought of the method of making the Stone of Light with the help of many people, which Agatha had mentioned. If there was a witch who could control or transfer magic power, they could also circumvent the limitation of Mystery Moon's own power. In the evening, he found Tilly Wimbledon. A magic control-type auxiliary witch? After listening to the prince's description, she pondered for a moment. No one on Sleeping Island has such an ability. Is that so? Roland could not help but sigh. It seemed that Mystery Moon could only rely on her own efforts to improve. However, Tilly's next words made his expression change. But I know where you can find such a witch. Chapter 409. Could it be that she didn't follow you to Sleeping Island? The prince soon realized what Princess Tilly meant. Indeed. Princess Tilly shook her head helplessly. Her name is Spear Passy. Her ability is Magic Channel, which can connect the magic power of several witches. In other words, the witches connected to the channel can temporarily borrow the magic power of others while the channel is active. That should be enough to meet your requirements. She paused. She lives in Fallen Dragon Ridge. Since you know so clearly, you must have contacted this witch. Roland was puzzled. Why did she stay there, even at the risk of being arrested by the church? Tilly was silent for a moment before she answered. Because she's both a marquis and the lord of Fallen Dragon Ridge. Lord? He was stunned. A witch? That's right. Her father, Old Parsi, the previous lord, passed his title and territory to her instead of his second or third son. Because of her high status, Spear can hide her identity well and live a much better life than ordinary witches. Tilly said slowly, during the Great Migration, she took the initiative to come to my door and offer help. That's how I was able to gather the witches in the central and southern towns of the kingdom so quickly. Took the initiative to come to my door. Roland immediately sensed something unusual. Wait, she doesn't intend to take in her compatriots? No. Tilly shook her head. Not only that, she also wants these witches to leave their territory as soon as possible to avoid being persecuted by the church. For Spear, the position of lord is obviously much more important. If the church found out that the lord was sheltering witches, the position would undoubtedly become precarious. After all, Fallen Dragon Ridge was not a desolate border town. There were local churches and resident priests, and the area of influence of the believers was much larger than that of the western region. Although Roland knew this, he was still surprised by her choice. If the local witches are caught, does she? I asked her the same question, Tilly said regretfully. Spear Passy told me bluntly that if they were caught by the people, she would find a way to replace the witches in the prison with other prisoners and smuggle them out of the country. But if they were caught by the Judgment Army or the Church, she would basically choose to sit back and do nothing. So, in order to solve the hidden danger of the witches, he took the initiative to contact Princess Tilly. It was probably because of this that Tilly did not consider settling down in Fallen Dragon Ridge. Instead, she took the risk to cross the strait and go to the strange fjords. Thinking of this, Roland frowned. Do you think I can persuade her to go to Border Town? There's not much hope, but you can try. Tilly spread out her hands. I'm just telling you that there is such a witch, but I can't guarantee that she will come. Roland heaved a long sigh. I'll send a messenger to talk to her first. There was no doubt that Nightingale was the most suitable person to be the messenger. She was able to sneak into the castle without being noticed, and she was also able to detect lies. As long as she showed that she was not hostile, the other party probably wouldn't take any drastic actions. It would take 5 or 6 days to travel from Border Town to Fallen Dragon Ridge by boat, but it would only take half a day for Maggie to fly by air. With the help of lightning, the journey would not be too dangerous. The three witches were the most mobile combination in the Witch Union. Now that they had guns, they could attack and defend at the same time. After thinking for a while, Roland had an idea. Although the success rate of persuading the Marquis was close to 0, it was necessary to investigate the situation in the Marquis's territory. Fallen Dragon Ridge was the main road to the southernmost region, which was within the scope of his spring offensive plan. I heard that another witch in the castle has evolved. Tilly suddenly changed the topic. Ah, are you talking about Mystery Moon? She has indeed condensed her magic power. Roland nodded and roughly described the process of her evolution. However, using the ancient witches' methods to promote the evolution isn't ideal for the improvement of magic power. If you want to be like Anna, you still have to learn the basic knowledge honestly. But this can also be regarded as a way to improve the ability, Tilly said with great interest, and in the content you just mentioned, there is one point that I am very concerned about. Ability is the concrete manifestation of magic power, not a natural phenomenon. How should I understand this sentence? This is also my personal speculation. He picked up the cup and took a sip of hot tea. Whether it is Anna's heart fire or black fire, there is no corresponding example in nature. It is not difficult to understand that they are the embodiment of magic power. But what about the ordinary flames before the evolution? So I assume that from the beginning, they are all composed of magic power, a reflection of the heat in the brain, and with the gradual deepening of understanding, the image of heat is constantly changing. This coincides with Agatha's experience. Many witches have similar abilities before they evolve because they mostly see the same natural phenomenon. But after the High Awakening, the witches' abilities will become completely different, which is caused by the huge difference in everyone's cognition. It sounds reasonable, Tilly said noncommittally. But according to this, if witches of the same kind have the same understanding of things, they will still be very close to each other when evolving new abilities, right? Something like that, provided that their ability to understand is exactly the same. Roland still had a thought that he didn't say, and that was, to what extent could magic power evolve in the end? Since it formed the basis of all kinds of abilities, it fully showed that it had a fundamental nature and versatility. If there was an omniscient and omnipotent witch, wouldn't she be able to display all of her abilities at will? You came from a world without magic power? Tilly suddenly asked. The prince almost spat out all the tea in his mouth. He wiped the corner of his mouth and asked, what are you talking about? In the past month, I have read through all the books you wrote, and I always felt that something was wrong. Princess Lannister looked straight into his eyes. It was not until what you said just now that I finally understood what the problem was. You have completely excluded magic power from nature. Whether it is natural science theoretical foundation, or elementary physics, there is no mention of magic power at all. You said that the effect of magic power is a phenomenon that does not exist in nature, but magic power itself is a part of nature. Roland suddenly froze. He suddenly realized that he had completely forgotten that she lived in a world where magic power naturally existed, not only Tilly Wimbledon, but also Prince Roland when he was alive. But he had put magic power on the opposite side of natural phenomena, and he was used to it. Should I blame this careless mistake on the sudden extra memory? This time, I'm afraid it won't work. If Prince Roland's own knowledge was shallow, it would make sense that he copied the contents of these books exactly according to the content in his memory, but why does he even believe in this part of the memory, and subconsciously separate magic power? Can he still swear that this is the memory of Prince Roland as the dominant one? Roland felt a little thirsty. Chapter 410. He did not expect that the other party's question was actually a trap for him, and the source of this trap was already buried when he was writing all kinds of books. At Chinese Northwestern. It was just that when an average person came into contact with such a huge and complex information for the first time, it was extremely difficult to understand, and it was impossible to notice the flaws. As a natural science that studied the nature of everything in the world, it was absolutely inconceivable that the word magic power was not mentioned from the beginning to the end. And Roland himself had completely forgotten the memory of Prince Roland, except for the first month of his transmigration when he consciously imitated Prince Roland. After that he no longer cared about it. The minister did not dare to question him, and he did not need to hide himself in front of the witches, so he became more and more unscrupulous. But Tilly was not an ordinary witch. In addition to being the sister of Prince Roland, she was also an extraordinary. Not only did she read all the books in a short time, but she also keenly noticed this abnormality, and the clarity of her logical thinking was no less than that of a modern person who had received universal education. Not only that, but she also used questions to guide his opinion, and the two sides confirmed each other, making it almost impossible for him to refute. A big crisis. Roland's brain was spinning rapidly, but he could not think of any feasible response. For someone who could see this, any far-fetched explanation would only increase the other party's doubts, and a lie needed more lies to cover up, and the loopholes would only increase. In the midst of the awkward silence, Tilly spoke again, and this time her voice was much slower. You don't need to rush to tell me the answer, it's already late. I'll go back to the witch house first. You should also rest early, Your Highness. Ah, yes, Roland stared at the gray-haired woman, not knowing what she was thinking about in the end, and for a moment he even forgot to get up to see her off. When Tilly walked to the door of the office, she stopped and looked back at him. Can I trust you? In the past, Roland would not hesitate to pat his chest and say yes, but at this time, he found that he could not easily say yes, and finally just slowly nodded. After the door was closed, Nightingale clicked her tongue in wonder and said, "She left just like that. Why do you look so regretful?" Roland glared at her. "I feel like she was so close to knowing your true background." Nightingale stuck out her tongue carelessly. "Why didn't she ask more questions?" "Because she didn't want to end up not even being able to be friends." The prince sighed. "What?" "No. It's nothing." Roland leaned against the back of his chair and felt a slight chill on his back. Tilly's performance could be said to be impeccable. She did not question him too much. As an ally of Sleeping Island, Border Town was undoubtedly the most powerful partner. In the face of a formidable enemy, allies were more important than the truth of identity. It would not be good news for the witches of Sleeping Island if the alliance broke down because of this issue. That was why Tilly chose to leave after raising her question, giving herself some buffer time. However, this didn't mean that she didn't need an answer. If she kept dragging things out, she would lose the trust of the other party when the threat of the enemy was eliminated. Now that she had put down this chess piece, it was time for him to respond. But Roland could not reveal the real information to Tilly, at least not now. Anna and Nightingale were not a big problem. They had known him from the beginning. But Tilly was Prince Roland's sister after all. Before he found out what kind of thoughts she had about Prince Roland, he had to bury this information in the bottom of his heart. Shaking his head and putting these annoying things aside, Roland looked at Nightingale and said, "You heard the conversation just now. I plan to let you, Maggie, and Lightning inquire about the situation. What do you think? Of course, no problem, Your Highness. It's not as simple as a conversation. To be honest, I'm a little worried about you, he said in a slow voice. Ah, what do you mean, worried? Nightingale's voice suddenly became a little stiff. I'm fine, even if I have to kidnap her and bring her here. That's exactly what I'm worried about. Roland knocked on the table and said, What do you mean kidnap her and bring her here? I'm afraid she'll tear us apart. Listen, you can't do anything stupid this time. Find out the situation first, and then find a chance to meet Spear Passy. It's okay if she refuses, but don't threaten her. As a witch, she's not a stranger to you. That's it. She said disappointedly. That's all about witches. Roland curled his lips. In addition, you need to cooperate with Lightning to record the surrounding environment of Fallen Dragon Ridge, the city defense facilities, patrols, and garrison arrangements, and then return as soon as possible. Nightingale mumbled a response. Last but not least. He paused. Pay attention to your own safety. That's the most important thing. Here, another glass of ale. Hey, is the oatmeal not ready yet? Coming. Sorry to keep you waiting. Otto Luashi walked into the tavern named Underground Trumpeter and was immediately surrounded by the noise. The roaring fire dispelled the chill, and the dull smell of sour and body odor hit his face, making him frown slightly. As a noble, Otto rarely stepped into cheap civilian places, and he was not used to drinking close to people. If it were not for his appointment with Rat, he would never visit this alley tavern in the outer city. According to the rules of this place, he soon found his target. A skinny man wearing a hood was sitting in a corner of the tavern. There was no candle on the table, and half of his body was hidden in the darkness. Beside his hand was a small piece of white bone. Otto walked to the man and sat down. To Skeleton Fingers. You don't have any wine. What are you going to offer? Something to measure everything with, he said the code word. The man shrugged. Just call me Hood. I heard that you're here to ask for information. Otto nodded. While Timothy did not reply for a long time, he had not been idle. Instead, he had been asking around for information about the rebel king. The fact that the king could still firmly occupy the western region after half a year after his ascension to the throne, and that Timothy could not do anything about it showed that the rebel king was a force to be reckoned with. To get as much information as possible, dealing with Rat was the fastest way. This was the 6th Rat he had made an appointment with. Otto was shocked by the information he had received so far. The legendary rebel king, Roland Wimbledon, the 4th son of Wimbledon III, not only did not show any signs of decadence, but even issued a challenge to the new king, claiming that he would take the initiative to overthrow Timothy sooner or later. Moreover, Timothy had not only said so, but had also really done so. Although Timothy had tried his best to conceal the news, Otto had still noticed the strangeness of the collapse of King City's buildings. If this news was true, then the value of forming an alliance with Timothy would be very questionable. He had to get to the bottom of this to prevent the Kingdom of Dawn from falling into trouble. That's right, Otto Luashi said in a low voice. I want to know what the loud noise and collapse of the palace in King's City were about 3 months ago. Chapter 411. You found the right person. Hood grinned. His voice was a little hoarse, making it hard to tell whether he was 21 or 21. 21. Although I live in the outer city, I happened to be near the palace on the day of the incident. When the roar sounded, I ran to the gate of the palace wall. You probably don't know how terrifying that sound was. If thunder exploded on the ground, it would be nothing more than that. The windows of the surrounding houses, whether made of paper or glass, were all destroyed by an invisible force. Some people were even scared to death by the sudden sound. Every rat claimed that he happened to be nearby and witnessed the whole incident, but after a comparison, everyone's story was different. Alright, let's not talk about these meaningless things anymore. How was it born? Otto Luashi interrupted. Is this incident really related to Prince Roland Wimbledon? Hood coughed twice and stretched out his right hand. Of course I can tell you, but you need to measure everything, right? Otto untied his waist pouch. How much? The so-called measure of everything was just another name for the golden dragon. Only a group like the rats liked to set up simple signals or passwords to show off their mysteriousness. They had no standards at all. Hood gestured with his hand. He took out 2 golden dragons and put them in Hood's hand. This is not a cheap fee. I hope your information is worth it. Of course, this is related to the credibility of skeleton fingers. Hood smiled greedily and put the golden dragon in his arms. The credibility of the rats was probably as ridiculous as the benevolence of the king. Otto snorted coldly in his heart. Speak. I'll answer your first question first. Probably because of the money, the hooded man's posture was much more relaxed. He took a sip of ale, leaned back in his chair, and pointed at the ceiling. Thunder comes from the sky. What do you mean? Otto frowned. Didn't you ask how the thunder came about? Hood lowered his voice. All thunder comes from the sky, and this time is no exception. I saw with my own eyes, before the roar, a white stone floated into the palace, and then what happened next happened. Ridiculous. Are you trying to tell me that a huge rock fell from the sky and destroyed most of the palace? Hee, I'm telling the truth. Otherwise, skeleton fingers wouldn't have assigned this job to me. If you think I'm lying, you can leave now. Hood shrugged. But the fee won't be refunded. Continue. Otto suppressed his displeasure. From the moment the stone appeared to the moment it fell into the palace, it was only a few breaths of time. But I saw it clearly at that time. It wasn't big, nor was it fast. It was impossible for it to smash the Sky Dome Palace. That's why I said it was floating. In addition, at the same time as the loud noise and thick smoke appeared, I also saw rolling flames. The momentum was very threatening, and it was definitely not caused by a collision. Hood smacked his lips. In fact, didn't His Majesty Timothy's final search prove this? He closed the inner city and cleaned it several times, but didn't catch any suspects. Plus, the palace itself is heavily guarded. If the attack didn't come from the sky, where else could it have come from? He took another sip of ale. As for the flames and thick smoke, they were very similar to the phenomenon produced when an alchemy item called snow powder burns, which is why I'm sure it was an attack. By the way, I also know some information about snow powder, but you'll have to pay extra for it, just. No, I don't want to know, Otto interrupted. He had heard a little about this thing from other sources. It was originally a celebratory item, but after modification, it could be used as a weapon. Rats were unlikely to know its specific composition, so he did not need to waste his money on it. Okay, now to answer your second question. Hood spread out his hands indifferently. There's no doubt that this matter has a lot to do with Prince Roland. Why? I don't know when you arrived at King's City. Of course, I'm not asking about your background or identity. This is the rule of Blackstreet, so you don't have to answer me. Hood chuckled. What I mean is, if you arrived at King's City in early autumn, you'd definitely know one thing. His Majesty sent thousands of troops to attack the western region, but only a few came back alive. Moreover, these defeated soldiers carried the letter that Prince Roland submitted to His Majesty. Since all 6 rats mentioned this, it seemed to be true, but he still had to ask a few more questions. You mean the notice about revenge? It's really sensational. Are you sure it's not a rumor? Most of the letters followed the defeated soldiers into the palace, and the few that came out were basically searched by City Hall, but Skeleton Fingers always surprises customers. In fact, I have a copy of the notice here. Hood held up 5 fingers. Considering that it's a personal letter from Prince Roland, and it's rare, the price will be a little higher. What do you think? Otto Luashi returned to the palace against the cold wind, and Belinda immediately greeted him. Any news? Not much, but I got a letter from Prince Roland. He handed the crumpled note to her, then took off his coat, sat in front of the fireplace, and told her about his investigation in detail. The 6 rats basically gave the same answer to the second question. With this note, the result should be clear. Roland Wimbledon is not as weak as His Majesty said. In fact, it's the opposite. If the Kingdom of Dawn forms an alliance with Timothy, it may not benefit them at all, and they may even make themselves a troublesome enemy. But the rats all gave different answers to the first question, Belinda said with a frown. This proves that the attack was very strange, and almost no one knows how it came about. I'm actually starting to believe the last rat's words. Otto took a sip of hot tea and let out a long sigh. After staying in the cheap tavern for too long, he felt uncomfortable all over. From the sky. Belinda looked at him in surprise. Are you crazy? Of course not. If I hadn't seen this letter, I wouldn't have dared to think in this direction. He's very confident about the time and place of attack. Only by attacking from the sky can he cross the towering city walls and tight defensive lines, and even the well-informed rats don't know about it. He curled his lips. But that's not the point. The point is what we should do next. The threat of the church is imminent. They should stop fighting and unite against the foreign enemy. That's not for us to decide. Otto shook his head. The only thing we can do is to try our best to win over a reliable ally for the Kingdom of Dawn. His Majesty Timothy Wimbledon doesn't seem to be reliable. Do you want to go to the Western region? Belinda was slightly startled. Isn't that place affected by the months of demons and in danger? It's nothing compared to the danger of the kingdom's destruction. After a moment of silence, he made up his mind. You stay here and wait for the new king's reply. I'll go to the Western region alone. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.